Hey guys, tonight we're heading into a place that's both frozen in time and constantly on the verge of explosion. You're walking along a rugged mountain trail in the pitch-black dark, wind cutting across your cheeks, and the faint hum of power lines buzzing above. There's no GPS signal here, no glowing billboards, no traffic, just cold soil, tall pines, and a silence that feels just a little too orchestrated. You're near the 38th parallel, the invisible line that slices the Korean peninsula in two. On one side, K-pop, kimchi tacos, and global tech giants. On the other, a land where electricity flickers, statues never blink, and history is rewritten by candlelight and decree. You probably won't survive this, at least not without having your worldview completely rewired. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing where you're tuning in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The northern half of Korea has always been the tougher sibling, the one that grows up with frostbitten hands, stubborn hills, and fewer friendly neighbors. You're trekking now through Manchurian air, the kind that smells faintly of pine and iron ore. It's the kind of place that forces you to grow calluses just to survive. Long before anyone called it North Korea, this land was defined not by borders, but by mountains and bloodlines. Go back far enough, say 5,000 years, and you'll hear whispers of the mythic Dangun, a god king said to have founded the first Korean kingdom, Gojoseon. Did he really descend from heaven, born of a bear woman and a heavenly prince? Historians still argue whether Dangun ever existed at all, or if he was just an early PR campaign for unifying clans. Either way, the myth stuck. You can still see statues of him today, arms outstretched, watching over cities that no longer say his name out loud. By the time the Chinese Han Dynasty pushed its way into the northern reaches of the Korean peninsula, around 108 BCE, things started to solidify. Trade routes crossed rivers, fortresses popped up along ridges, and the concept of Korea began to take shape. Not that the locals cared for outsiders, northern tribes resisted imperial control with the kind of tenacity that would later become, well, government policy. You step into Goguryeo next, the first real empire of the north. These were the tough cookies, the mountain warriors, the ones who painted tigers on their tombs and launched spears at Chinese armies for fun. Goguryeo spanned parts of modern-day North Korea, China, and even Russia, depending on whose map you're using. Its capital, at one point, was Pyongyang. Yes, that Pyongyang. Back then, it wasn't a city of parades and propaganda, but a bustling hub of stone walls, Buddhist temples, and merchant squabbles. Interestingly, Goguryeo wasn't just brawn. They built elaborate tombs with starry ceilings and held philosophical debates between Buddhist monks and Confucian scholars, basically ancient Reddit threads carved into limestone. They even had a concept of national unity, rooted in shared suffering and military discipline. Sound familiar? Meanwhile, the land that would later become South Korea was evolving under Baekje and Silla, kingdoms more open to foreign ideas, maritime trade, and, not being completely allergic to change. But the North, it doubled down on its fortress mentality. In fact, some scholars believe the siege state mindset of ancient northern Korea planted the seeds for North Korea's later obsession with military readiness and isolation. Again, historians still debate just how much of modern North Korea is a product of ancient psychology. But it's hard to ignore the echoes. Fast forward a few centuries. The Mongols arrive. They smash everything, ride off into the sunset, and leave behind a people even more suspicious of outsiders. A fun tidbit. Some records suggest Mongol-Korean intermarriages led to noble bloodlines with very questionable mustaches. Picture it. High cheekbones, horse riding skills, and a hair situation that screams, I kill deer with my bare hands. By the time the Joseon dynasty takes over the entire peninsula in the 14th century, things begin to simmer. But up here in the north, simmering still means snowstorms, famine, and squabbling over who gets to be in charge of the rice taxes. You can almost hear the grinding stone wheels of ideology forming beneath your feet. And while all this history seems ancient, it's important because the land remembers. The caves, the rivers, the mountains, they all play a role in shaping the defiant spirit that would later fuel resistance against colonialism, capitalism, and eventually reality itself. You're not just walking through dirt, you're walking through a powder keg with a 1,000-year fuse. In this first stretch, there's no Kim yet. No gulags, no goose-stepping soldiers. Just wind, warriors, and whispered origin stories. But soon, the air will tighten. The myths will gain names. And that line you crossed, quiet and invisible, will start to matter a whole lot more. You push onward, deeper into this mist-shrouded past, your boots crunching on stone pathways once tread by kings, monks, and invaders alike. The fog wraps around your thoughts like a heavy cloak, and the trees whisper stories older than any border. Tonight, you drift into an age of rival kingdoms and tangled legacies, where myths share space with cold steel, and power is both sacred and slippery. At the heart of this ancient chaos lies Goguryeo, that formidable northern kingdom we brushed past earlier. It wasn't just a fortress, it was a statement. Its rulers styled themselves as divine warriors, defenders of the true Korea, though no one could agree exactly what that meant. You stand outside the ruins of Hwando Fortress now, wind slicing through mountain passes that once echoed with the sounds of battle horns and drums. Imagine fur-cloaked generals watching the horizon, waiting for the next Chinese envoy or the next betrayal. By the 5th century CE, Goguryeo wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. With sophisticated political systems, a written language adapted from Chinese script, and a complex taxation system, it began to look like a real empire. And yet, despite all that growth, its foreign relations mostly consisted of, well, punching neighbors in the face. There's a famous king, Gwanggaeto the Great, who's still celebrated in both Koreas today. His tombstone is the size of a small building and reads like the diary of someone who wanted to win every game of Risk ever. He conquered Manchuria, shoved back the Japanese, and reminded China that Korea could throw elbows too. Was he truly a national unifier, or just a particularly ambitious warlord? Historians still argue whether Gwanggaeto was building a Korean future or just rewriting old grudges in blood. And yet, while all this was happening in the north, the southern kingdoms, Baekje and Silla, were brewing their own concoctions of power, culture, and betrayal. Baekje leaned into maritime trade and art, becoming a cultural powerhouse. Silla, often underestimated, would eventually do something shocking, form an alliance with Tang China to take down the other two kingdoms. Imagine that, Koreans teaming up with their historical frenemy to destroy fellow Koreans. You can almost hear the ancient group chats. Hey Tang, you free this weekend? Thinking of taking out Baekje. Bring spears. The result? The unified Silla period. A golden age for the south, but a darkening horizon for the north. While southern temples sparkled with gold leaf and scholars debated Confucian etiquette over tea, the remnants of Goguryeo slunk into the shadows. But they didn't vanish. Not quite. From the ashes of Goguryeo rose a defiant splinter state, Balhae. You might not have heard of it. Most school books breeze past it like a hiccup. But it was, in many ways, the North's attempt to say, we're still here, and we're not done yet. Balhae ruled over large parts of northern Korea and Manchuria. Its cities were planned, its kings styled themselves as heirs to greatness, and its economy thrived on trade routes stretching to Japan and the Tang dynasty. Here's the twist. Historians still debate whether Balhae was more Korean, more Manchurian, or some mix of both. And in modern times, this question gets political fast. North Korea claims Balhae as a patriotic predecessor. South Korea sees it as a curiosity. China sometimes shrugs and calls it their own. It's like three people fighting over who gets grandma's antique lamp, except the lamp is a lost kingdom and everyone's yelling in different languages. But Balhae doesn't last forever. After 2 centuries, it collapses under pressure from the rising Khitan tribes. Its people scatter. Some flee south, merging with the Silla remnants. Others vanish into Siberian forests. And so, the peninsula fragments again, shattered into a chaotic era known as the later 3 kingdoms. By now, you're dizzy. Kingdoms keep falling, names keep changing, and maps feel more like squiggles drawn by a drunk historian. But in the midst of this turmoil, something strange is happening. A unified cultural identity starts to flicker. Through war, poetry, and farming calendars, a sense of Koreanness begins to simmer. You might be asking, why does this matter to the North Korean state today? Because North Korea still draws heavily from these ancient stories. School children are taught about Gwanggaeto's conquests, not as a footnote, but as moral fuel. State TV will sometimes reference Balhae's resilience, subtly implying that the North has always been the heir of proud, isolated empires. The mythos isn't just for bedtime, it's a national operating system. And even the isolationist instincts, the suspicion of foreign influence, it all goes back to these centuries of invasion, betrayal, and rebirth. When your ancestors were constantly fighting off outsiders, Chinese dynasties, Mongol horsemen, Japanese pirates, you don't grow up dreaming of open borders. You grow up watching the hills. So here you are, standing on those hills. Ancient stones beneath your feet, temple bells echoing faintly through the past. The sun sets over a land still haunted by royal ghosts and forgotten capitals. The kingdoms may have changed names, but the pattern remains. North Korea's future hasn't arrived yet. But its past? Oh, it's alive. Breathing through monuments, muttered oaths, and the careful erasure of anything that doesn't serve the story. You keep walking. The night deepens. The border gets closer, and the whispers get louder. The trees begin to thin, the hills dip into valleys, and the wind carries something new, a hum, low and ancient, like drums beneath the earth. You've crossed into a chapter where diplomacy meant daggers, and kings didn't rule for long unless they kept one hand on the sword and the other on the scroll. Here, warlords, monks, and marauding neighbors each left their imprint on the DNA of a people who would learn to endure anything, even each other. As the later 3 kingdoms tear across the peninsula, it's less Game of Thrones and more a brutal tug-of-war with no commercial breaks. The once mighty Silla limps along like a retired rock star, refusing to leave the stage. Baekji's remnants try to reassert themselves in the southwest. But it's the north again. Yes, always the North, that claws its way into dominance through a rising figure, Wang Geon. He's not born a king. He's born a merchant's son with a sailor's blood and battlefield instincts. He aligns with rebels, rides the momentum of discontent, and in 918 he declares a new dynasty, Goryeo. Ring a bell? It should. That's where the name Korea comes from. Suddenly, the peninsula has a new center of gravity, and it's right in Kaesong, in what is now modern-day North Korea. Wang Geon is pragmatic, sharp, and oddly sentimental. He issues the famous 10 injunctions, a set of royal guidelines that include everything from respect Buddhism to don't tick off the Khitan. Historians still argue whether these rules were political genius or royal micromanaging, but they offer a rare glimpse into the mind of a ruler who knew power was a river, not a rock. And for a while, things work. Goryeo becomes a stable, if occasionally chaotic, kingdom. They invent movable metal-type centuries before Gutenberg. They create the stunning Tripitaka Koreana, a massive Buddhist text carved onto over 80,000 wooden blocks. meticulously done, even though it was stored in a building that monks claimed could breathe. No joke, you'll still find it today in Hyensa Temple. Some say it was protected by divine wind, others say it's just incredible engineering. You decide. But stability in this part of the world is always on loan. And soon, a new threat gallops over the horizon. Mongols. Lots of them. You can almost hear the hooves. By the 13th century, Goryeo is on its knees, forced into submission by Kublai Khan himself. Royal marriages are arranged. Korean princes spend more time in Beijing than in Kaesong. The Mongols don't colonize as much as they absorb, using Korea as a naval launch pad for their doomed invasions of Japan. Quirky fact: during these Mongol invasions, Korea is forced to build warships, feed troops, and provide concubines. One Korean noblewoman, known as Empress Gi, even rises to become the Empress of Yuan China. Think about that. Out of an era of total domination comes a Korean woman wielding power at the heart of the empire that conquered her homeland. Eat your heart out, dynastic patriarchy. Still, back in Goryeo proper, the mood is not so glamorous. There are uprisings, assassinations, and a slow-burning resentment of foreign manipulation. Sound familiar? The blueprint for future North Korean suspicion is etched deeper into the bones of this region with each passing decade. Eventually, as the Mongol grip weakens, Goryeo limps into its final chapters. By the late 14th century, it's become so bloated with internal corruption that a general named Yi Seong-gye, supposed to lead a campaign against the Ming, decides to just turn his army around and seize power instead. And boom, just like that, Goryeo's lights flicker out, and the Joseon dynasty is born in 1392. Now, the Joseon period will get its proper due soon, but let's take a breath here, because everything you've just wandered through, that wasn't prelude. That was North Korea's ancient operating manual. Resist outsiders, use myth as mortar, and survive by any means necessary. You see, while much of the world views North Korea through the lens of the Cold War or modern dictatorship, its own internal narrative starts much earlier. It doesn't begin with communism. It begins with centuries of fighting off Chinese armies, Mongol riders, Japanese pirates, and southern rivals who always seemed just a little too smug. And it's not just about war. It's about memory. Every story carved into a stone, every poem composed in exile, every temple rebuilt after fire, these become cultural antibodies. The northern part of the peninsula, in particular, becomes adept at absorbing pain and calling it pride. A strange but telling example? There's a folktale passed down in northern villages about a tiger who guards a sacred mountain, biting off the heads of anyone who tries to climb it with greed in their heart. Not military, not political, just a spiritual warning. Stay humble or be eaten. You're beginning to realize that this place doesn't forget anything. As you descend toward the river that once divided Goguryeo and Silla, moonlight glints off stone bridges that haven't carried traffic in centuries. The river's name has changed, the emperor's long dead, but the way the water curls, the way the mountain shadows fall, it all feels oddly eternal, like you're walking on a page that never turns. And that, perhaps, is the most enduring characteristic of North Korea's historical spirit: permanence. Not the kind you celebrate, the kind you endure. The roots have gone deep. But the branches? Oh, they're about to be scorched. You move through time now as if through molasses, slow, sticky, and heavier with every step. The dawn of the Joseon dynasty spreads across the peninsula like ink on parchment, redrawing the land not with conquest, but with codes, creeds, and calligraphy. The year is 1392, and though the ruling house has changed, you're still in a Korea that mistrusts strangers and venerates its past like scripture. Joseon is long, like really long. It lasts over 5 centuries, and you're going to feel every decade of it. But don't worry, there's gossip, betrayal, philosophical showdowns, and yes, more than a few heads on metaphorical spikes. The dynasty is founded by Yi Shongyi, now King Taizhou, who starts strong, land reforms, legal codes, a Confucian makeover of the entire court. He moves the capital to Hanyang, modern-day Seoul, but make no mistake, Northern Korea remains central to the kingdom's brain and brawn. Scholars from Kaesong, generals from Pyongan province, monks from the mountains of Hamgyong, they all shape what's to come. But not everyone's thrilled. You see, the Joseon dynasty is deeply, obsessively Confucian. Buddhism, once the spiritual anchor of Goryeo, is slowly strangled. Temples are taxed, monks banned from cities, and sacred texts burned. Historians still argue whether this purge was moral reform or a political power grab. Either way, it reshapes Korea's spiritual spine for centuries. You're sitting now in a Confucian classroom, low wooden desk, chilled inkstone, your teacher reciting the Analects by candlelight. The philosophy drills into your skull: loyalty, obedience, harmony, hierarchy. Society becomes a pyramid of expectations with the king perched at the top like a particularly rigid bird. And here's where things start getting very North Korean. This obsession with order, respect for hierarchy, and suspicion of outsiders? It's not invented by communism. It's fermented here, in classrooms, courtrooms, and rice paddies. The idea that a nation's health comes from obedience and purity is already hardwired before Marx ever picked up a pen. Now, let's meet King Sejong the Great, probably the only monarch both North and South Korea can agree to fanboy over. He reigns from 1418 to 1450, and he's a certified polymath, scientist, poet, inventor, and national dad. Under his rule, Korea invents the Hangul alphabet. You know, the one with the satisfying blocks and circles that makes you feel like you could read it if you just squinted hard enough. Hangul is revolutionary. Unlike the complex Chinese script, it's phonetic and learnable in a day or two. Sejong literally says, "A wise man can master it in one morning, and a fool in 10 days." Ouch, but also fair. Here's the twist. The ruling elite hated Hangul at first. Why? Because it threatened their monopoly on knowledge. If farmers could read royal decrees, what next? Voting. The alphabet was even nicknamed women's script to belittle it. But it endured, and later generations, especially in the North, would embrace it as a symbol of self-reliance and cultural sovereignty. Sound familiar? Now, while Sejong's court invents rain gauges, water clocks, and astronomical maps, elsewhere, the mood turns sour. Invasions from Japan, 1592 to 1598, known as the Imjin Wars, devastate the peninsula. You're caught in the crossfire now, running through burning villages, dodging musket fire, and trying not to stare directly at the war crimes. This is the era of Admiral Yi Sun-sin, the man, the myth, the turtle shipbuilder. His victories against the Japanese Navy are so legendary that he's practically a marine deity now. There's a reason both North and South Korea name warships after him. Legend says he won 23 battles without a single defeat. Historians still argue whether some of those stats are polished. But does it matter? His ghost practically commands salutes. And yet, the war leaves scars. Entire cities flattened, rice stores looted, cultural treasures burned. And who helps rebuild? Not many. The Ming dynasty of China provides some aid, but with a price. Once again, Korea, especially its northern half, learns that the only dependable protector is itself. As the centuries turn, Korea becomes more and more insulated. The Joseon court grows paranoid, its kings more ceremonial than powerful. Western powers start poking around Asia, but Korea closes its ports, earning the nickname the Hermit Kingdom. Yep, that phrase wasn't born in 1950. It started here, when gunboats came calling and Korea said, "No thanks, we're good." There's a peculiar event in 1866 that really drives this home. A French warship sails up the Taedong River near Pyongyang. Yep, the same river where statues of Kim Il-sung would later loom, and tries to demand trade rights. Korean forces attack, and the French barely escape. Pyongyang, then as now, says absolutely not to outside influence. By now, the Joseon dynasty is wheezing. Corruption, famine, rebellions, and hovering like vultures are the imperial powers, Russia, China, and most ominously, Japan. But before we go there, notice something. The North, despite famine and war, becomes a crucible of resilience. Its mountains shelter guerrilla fighters. Its people harden. Its distance from the capital makes it self-governing in attitude, if not in law. So when you ask why North Korea later became the center of rebellion, independence, and yes, authoritarianism, it's not because of ideology alone, it's because history shaped its soil that way. And now, just over the next ridge, comes the empire that would change everything. You step into a storm now, not one of thunder or rain, but of flags, boots, and languages that do not belong. The year is 1910, and the map has changed again, this time not by Korea's choice. You're standing at the gates of Japanese colonization, and this isn't a negotiation, it's a takeover. The Joseon dynasty is over. After more than 500 years, it collapses not with a bang, but with a silent bow to imperial pressure. The last emperor, Sunjong, signs away sovereignty under duress. And just like that, Korea becomes part of the Japanese empire. No sovereignty, no say, no secrets. For the next 35 years, this peninsula, especially the rugged, defiant north, will become both laboratory and battlefield. The Japanese call it an annexation. Most Koreans call it theft. You're about to witness how colonial trauma writes itself into every stone wall, every family tree, every whispered lullaby north of the 38th. Let's start with the basics. The Japanese don't just occupy Korea, they remake it. Korean language, banned in schools. Korean names, erased from official documents. Korean culture, systematically dismantled. You're expected to bow to the Emperor of Japan, to think in Japanese, to pray at Shinto shrines. It's like being told to forget your own reflection. But the North resists. In these misty valleys and freezing hills, the colonizers have a harder time. Fewer railways, more hidden villages, tougher weather, and most importantly, fighters who've never had patience for outsiders. The March 1st movement of 1919, Korea's great push for independence, starts in Seoul, yes, but it spreads like wildfire through northern provinces. Pyongan and Hamgyong become hotbeds of rebellion. One of the most important centers of resistance? Manchuria, just across the northern border. There, Korean guerrilla fighters organize, strike, vanish. You're trekking with them now, through snowy forests, rifles wrapped in rags, boots full of holes. They don't have tanks, but they have fury. They don't have armies, but they have patience. Their names rarely make the headlines, but one of them will. A boy born in 1912 near Pyongyang. His name is Kim Il-sung. Or is it? Here's your quirky tidbit. Kim Il-sung was originally a name used by multiple resistance fighters. Like Robin Hood or Spartacus, it was a mantle. Historians still argue whether the young Kim took the name to inspire fear or to borrow a legend that wasn't entirely his. Either way, by the 1930s, one particular Kim begins to stand out. Charismatic, relentless, wily, possibly aided by Soviet funding depending on who you ask. But let's zoom out for a moment. While resistance bubbles in the north, Japan is industrializing Korea at breakneck speed. Railroads, factories, mines, especially in the north, where mineral resources are plentiful. Cities like Hamhung and Chongjin become hubs of extraction and exploitation. Workers are conscripted. Labor conditions are brutal. You can almost feel the coal dust in your lungs. And yet, here's the dark irony. Those same railroads and factories will later help Kim Il-sung build a functioning state. The Japanese were laying down the tracks, not just physically, but structurally, for what would become North Korea's industrial skeleton. It's like watching someone build a prison, then hand the keys to the next warden. You're walking now through a Japanese police station in Pyongyang circa 1937. You hear interrogations, screams, paper rustling, resistance members captured and tortured. Outside, schoolchildren sing the Japanese anthem. Inside, national identity is burned letter by letter. The memory lingers. North Korea will never forget this humiliation. Ever. By World War II, Japan tightens its grip. Koreans are forced into its war machine, some as soldiers, many as laborers, and others as comfort women in military brothels. A trauma so deep that even today, it's barely spoken above a whisper. And in the North, many young men, Kim Il-sung among them, are now fully radicalized. Not just anti-Japan, but anti-imperial, anti-foreign, anti-capitalist. They've seen what unchecked power looks like, and they're not interested in forgiveness. You retreat across the border again, into the frigid Soviet wilderness. Here, in camps and hideouts, Korean communists are being trained, educated, armed. You might be freezing, but ideology burns hot. Lenin's words, Stalin's strategy, they sink deep into minds already conditioned to resist. Not everyone survives, but those who do, they'll return home with a mission. August 15th, 1945, Japan surrenders. World War II ends. You expect fireworks, relief, a nation restored, but instead, chaos. The peninsula is split, not along rivers or mountains, but along the 38th parallel, an arbitrary line drawn by men who'd never set foot there. The Soviets move into the north, the Americans take the south. What was supposed to be temporary becomes permanent. Pyongyang becomes the Soviet zone's capital. The factories still smoke, the railways still run. But now the Japanese signs are replaced by Cyrillic ones. And standing at the center, Kim Il-sung returned from exile, hailed by Soviet officers as the face of a new Korea. Did he earn this leadership through resistance? Or was he selected for convenience and pliability? Historians still argue. Some say he was the best the Soviets could find. Others claim he outmaneuvered rivals with sheer audacity. Regardless, he's in charge now. And here's where the fuse is lit. North Korea is no longer a concept. It's becoming a state, forged in colonization, tempered by resistance, backed by Moscow, and aimed very soon at war. The smoke hasn't cleared from World War II when you find yourself staring at barbed wire, Soviet tanks, and the stern face of a man freshly anointed by history, or by Stalin, depending on your perspective. Kim Il-sung, at only 33 years old, steps into the spotlight in the northern zone, wearing a crisp military cap and a tight-lipped smile. You're in Pyongyang, 1945, and the future is about to split like dry wood. The Americans and Soviets never meant for Korea to stay divided. The 38th parallel was drawn hastily, like a hotel room napkin sketch, just to keep the peace. But peace, as you've already sensed, doesn't tend to stick around here. North Korea, backed by Moscow, starts forming committees, redistributing land, printing newspapers filled with red stars and big promises. South Korea, backed by Washington, goes capitalist, chaotic, and increasingly anti-communist. You feel it in the air. Suspicion, propaganda, and a growing sense that this isn't temporary anymore. In the north, Kim Il-sung wastes no time. He sets up a provisional People's Committee and quickly becomes the chairman. You see posters of him in markets and schools, wearing a tidy suit and a look of benevolent certainty. The Soviets guide him, yes, but he also plays them. He knows how to speak the language of revolution, how to tell war-weary peasants what they want to hear, that the land will be theirs, the future will be theirs, and Korea will be strong again. Quirky fact: Kim Il-sung originally gave speeches using a thick northern dialect, nearly incomprehensible to some in the South. Soviet advisors had to help polish his public persona, even down to his accent. Today, of course, The Pyongyang dialect is considered the national standard in the north. Just another way language is used as a tool of control. By 1948, it's official. Two governments declare independence, the Republic of Korea in the south and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the north. Two flags, two anthems, two leaders, and zero trust. In Pyongyang, you attend the proclamation ceremony. Kim Il-sung's voice crackles over the loudspeakers. The crowds cheer, fireworks explode. But behind the applause, the military is quietly doubling in size. Soviet tanks line up in depots. Officers speak in hushed tones about unification, though no one means diplomacy. Then comes 1950. You blink, and the world catches fire. June 25th, 1950, North Korean forces flood across the 38th parallel. It's not a skirmish. It's a full-blown invasion. Tanks first, questions later. South Korean forces scatter. Seoul falls in just 3 days. Kim Il-sung calls it a liberation war. And if you believe the newspapers, flowers are falling from the sky. In reality, it's blood and rubble. You run with civilians trying to flee. Entire families stuffed into ox carts, train stations overflowing, whispered rumors that American planes are coming. They are, but not to rescue everyone. The United States, under a United Nations banner, intervenes. Led by General MacArthur, UN forces push the North Koreans back past the 38th, then all the way to the Chinese border. It looks like victory, until it doesn't. Enter China. 1 million Chinese volunteers storm across the Yalu River in winter, howling through the snow. You hear bugles at night, see shadows moving on frozen hills. The tide turns again, and the war devolves into a seesaw of attrition. Entire towns are destroyed, rebuilt, and destroyed again. Civilians vanish into forests. Soldiers sleep with grenades tucked under their pillows. It's 3 years of madness. Villages are bombed off the map, families torn in half. The northern countryside is left in scorched ruin. Some towns see 80% destruction. Pyongyang, leveled by carpet bombing. You don't just witness war here, you inhale it. And yet, through all of this, Kim Il-sung survives. His legend grows. Stories spread of him fighting in the mountains with nothing but a rifle and resolve, even if those tales are more fiction than fact. Still, in a land where truth is shaped like clay, what matters is not what happened, but what gets told. By 1953, both sides are exhausted. An armistice is signed at Panmunjom. Not peace, just a pause. The 38th parallel becomes the demilitarized zone, DMZ'd, a 2-kilometer-wide scar running across the waste of Korea. Armed guards stare each other down across it every day. They still do. The Korean War ends with no victor, only trauma. But in the north, Kim Il-sung declares victory anyway. He calls it a triumph of Korean will, a defeat of imperialist aggression. Statues go up, songs are written. The nation is in ruins, but in the eyes of the regime, that ruin is holy. A baptism by napalm, a mandate for isolation. And here comes the kicker. The war never officially ended. Even now, there's no peace treaty, just tension, landmines, and barbed wire. You emerge from the wreckage of the war into a new North Korea. It's poorer, angrier, but more focused than ever. The destruction becomes fuel. The isolation becomes policy. The leader? Elevated from man to myth. And you? You've just survived the storm that forged the country we now know. The war is over, but the silence it leaves behind is deafening. You walk through Pyongyang in 1954, and it feels like time itself has been stunned. Rubble still clings to street corners. Smoke curls from chimneys built out of broken stone. Entire neighborhoods are flattened, but the sound of hammers echoes through the cold morning air. Rebuilding has begun, not just with concrete, but with belief. Kim Il-sung is everywhere now. His voice on the radio, his face in murals, his quotes printed on school walls. You can't buy rice without hearing his name. You can't walk 10 feet without seeing a child salute a poster. He is not just a leader anymore. He is becoming something else, an idea. And here's where things shift from merely political to theatrical. Kim doesn't just rebuild North Korea. He reinvents it. He draws upon the ashes of war, the pain of colonization, and the anger of division to construct a new narrative. One where North Korea is not broken but chosen, not isolated but pure, the homeland of Juche. Juche, the word is everywhere, on banners, in textbooks, whispered like scripture. It's often translated as self-reliance, but that barely scratches the surface. Juche is part philosophy, part survival strategy, part divine revelation. You are told that Korea must stand alone, that all foreign influence is poison, that only the people, led by the eternal wisdom of the leader, can determine their destiny. Mainstream scholars call Juche a tool for consolidating dictatorship. North Korean texts call it the true path to human liberation. And in practice, it becomes the spiritual engine of the state. But what's really happening behind the scenes? Well, the Soviets are still sending aid, China too, the factories being rebuilt, funded by socialist brothers, the tractors plowing the fields, imported from Russia. So yes, Juche preaches independence, but like most national myths, it comes with footnotes written in someone else's ink. Still, in the 1950s and 60s it works. North Korea recovers astonishingly fast. In fact, for a while, it outpaces South Korea in industrial output. Cities like Hamhung and Chongjin become steel hubs. Electricity reaches even remote villages. You visit a textile factory in 1961 and watch workers, mostly women, singing revolutionary songs while spinning bolts of red cloth. But let's not romanticize too much. The economy is centralized, fragile, and deeply dependent on two things: foreign support and absolute obedience. Even minor dissent is punished. You hear whispers of Kwanli-so, prison camps hidden in mountain valleys, where the re-educatable break rocks until they forget why they ever asked questions. There's a curious twist to all of this. Art. North Korea becomes obsessed with performance, mass games, synchronized parades, musical tributes to the leader. You attend one in 1965 at the May Day Stadium. Tens of thousands of students flip colored cards in perfect unison to create the face of Kim Il-sung smiling over a rising sun. It's breathtaking. It's also terrifying. Historians still debate whether these mass spectacles are genuine expressions of loyalty or just deeply rehearsed fear. Maybe both. But they shape the national psyche in ways that linger. Meanwhile, Kim Il-sung consolidates power like a master puppeteer. Political rivals from the anti-Japanese resistance? Gone. Pro-Chinese voices? Silenced. Soviet sympathetic technocrats? Retired. The Workers' Party of Korea becomes a one-man show, and the audience has no choice but to clap. And then, in a move rarely seen in communist regimes, Kim starts grooming his son. You meet Kim Jong-il as a boy in propaganda posters. Soft features, serious eyes, always portrayed with perfect posture and early genius. At first, people aren't sure. A dynasty? In a socialist republic? That's confusing. But Kim Il-sung introduces the idea slowly. First through family stories, then through public appearances, then through party roles. By the end of the 1960s, the message is clear. The bloodline is the revolution. North Korea's diplomatic profile also begins to evolve. It builds ties with non-aligned nations, sending doctors to Africa, technicians to the Middle East, and pamphlets to Latin America. For a brief moment, North Korea positions itself as a kind of model developing nation. Small, strong, ideologically pure. And yet something begins to curdle. The economy slows. Agricultural output stutters. Dissent becomes not just rare but unthinkable. You watch a friend whisper a joke about the leader at a construction site and vanish the next morning. His name isn't spoken again. The The personality cult crystallizes. Statues of Kim Il-sung now number in the thousands. Every citizen wears a lapel pin with his face. Every home has a portrait, polished daily, sometimes inspected by officials. Children are taught to cry when they speak his name. If you don't cry, you must not love him enough. And here's a fringe detail for you. In the 1970s, North Korea allegedly begins faking entire cities along the DMZ, bright, clean, completely uninhabited, just to give the illusion of prosperity to the south. Look closely through binoculars from the border, and you'll see buildings with no glass in the windows. Illusion becomes institution. By the end of the decade, Kim Il-sung is firmly established not just as a man, but as eternal president. The title will later be made literal, enshrining him in the Constitution even after his death. You've walked from scorched rubble to statues of gold. You've watched a nation rise from ashes into a palace of mirrors. And standing now in the center of Pyongyang, under banners that stretch for blocks, you feel the weight of a country that has shaped every stone, every syllable, around one name. The question isn't whether Kim Il-sung has full control. The question is, what happens when he's gone? The sky over Pyongyang in the early 1980s is clear, polished, almost too perfect, like a painting approved by a committee. Loudspeakers hum softly with martial anthems. Street sweepers scrub spotless pavements under the watchful eyes of bronze statues. It feels like a country frozen in ceremony, in choreography, in a myth that's already begun embalming itself. But something's shifting. You can feel it in the quiet paranoia of party officials, in the wary glances of school teachers rehearsing patriotic chants, in the state's obsession with appearance. Because while everything outside shines with marble polish, inside, the cracks are spreading. Let's start with Kim Il-sung himself. Aging, still omnipresent, still parading through fields of adoring peasants, still reviewing missiles on massive trucks. But the man is mortal, even if the regime insists otherwise. He coughs more in public, he smiles less, and in the shadows, Kim Jong-il, his son, tightens his grip. By now, Kim Jong-il isn't just the son of the eternal president. He's the architect behind the scenes, especially of the cult of personality itself. You tour a film studio built under his direction in the 1980s. It's massive. Artificial streets mimic foreign cities: New York, Tokyo, Paris. Extras march in and out, recreating scenes of Korean glory and capitalist failure. It's not just entertainment, it's indoctrination with camera angles. Fun fact, Kim Jong-il adored cinema. He reportedly owned over 20,000 VHS tapes, including James Bond films and Rambo. He even had agents kidnap a famous South Korean film director and his actress ex-wife to build a stronger North Korean film industry. Historians still debate whether this was lunacy or strategy, or both. But while the leadership plays with illusion, reality outside the capital begins to strain. The economy stagnates. North Korea's heavy industry model, once fueled by Soviet support, starts rusting. Machines break, spare parts vanish, and worse, the USSR, the North's primary lifeline, begins to wobble. You're now walking through a factory in Chongjin. Once a proud symbol of self-reliance, it's eerily quiet. Conveyor belts sit idle. Workers arrive mostly to sweep floors. Electricity flickers unpredictably. The once booming northern economy is hollowing out. And Kim Jong-il's answer? Double down. He strengthens the narrative, adds new layers to the Yuche ideology, expands loyalty tests that categorize every citizen into songbun, a social classification system that determines everything from your job to your food rations. Are your grandparents revolutionary fighters? Great. Priority access. Did your uncle flee to the South in 1951? Sorry, you're now hostile class. Good luck getting promoted. It's like a caste system dressed in socialist garb, enforced by surveillance and fear. You attend a neighborhood meeting, one of the many Inminban block units, where citizens are expected to self-criticize, report on each other, and reaffirm loyalty to the regime. A woman stumbles on a prepared phrase. Her voice trembles. The room goes silent, and then, quietly, she's marked. But all of this tightening grip, isn't about strength, it's about control in decline. By the late 80s, the world is changing fast. The Berlin Wall falls. Communism in Eastern Europe collapses like dominoes. The Soviet Union enters its death spiral. And North Korea, it doesn't budge. It refuses to reform, refuses to open. It watches the world liberalize and whispers traitors. To Pyongyang, perestroika is a warning, not an inspiration. And yet, you can't help but notice the growing nervousness. Propaganda now includes not just praise of the great leader, but more aggressive condemnation of decaying capitalism, cowardly revisionists, and Western puppet states. The volume is louder, the tone more desperate. It's like a magician yelling louder because the trick is failing. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-il becomes official successor in all but name. He visits army bases, poses with school children, oversees stadium-sized mass games dedicated to himself. In one event, over 100,000 performers move in perfect unison to spell out, "Long live General Kim Jong-il," with placards. Spectacular? Yes. Voluntary? Absolutely not. By 1992, the government finally makes it public. Kim Jong-il is the heir. It's the first hereditary succession in a communist state. Even North Koreans conditioned for obedience are quietly stunned. A few whisper the question, is this socialism or monarchy? The regime's answer, yes. You witness a military parade that year. Tanks roll through Kim Il-sung Square. Soldiers goose-step. Jet fighters roar overhead. On the reviewing stand, Kim Il-sung raises his hand. But it's Kim Jong-il who nods, who steps forward, who claps just a little too early, as if rehearsing for a stage no one else is allowed to leave. And in the countryside, whispers grow louder. There's less meat in the markets, more hours without power. Workers at a hydroelectric dam confess that they haven't received wages in months. People still sing the songs, but the spark in their eyes is fading. They're tired. You're tired. Even the air in Pyongyang feels like it's holding its breath. Then, in 1994, it happens. Kim Il-sung dies. You remember where you were? Everyone does. The country erupts in choreographed mourning. People collapse in the streets. Students wail on command. Newscasters sob until their voices crack. Every television in the country plays tribute videos on repeat. The leader shaking hands with peasants, smiling at children, riding in convertibles past cheering crowds. But behind the curtain, panic grips the elite. Kim Jong-il must now lead not just as heir, but as God. And he inherits not glory, but catastrophe, because just beyond the edge of the camera frame, famine is already waiting. You step into darkness now, real, pitch-black darkness. Not symbolic, not poetic, just a literal absence of light. It's the mid-1990s in North Korea, and entire provinces are without electricity for days at a time. The countryside is quieter than ever, not because it's calm, but because it's empty. The factories are silent. The trains no longer run. The rice bowls are mostly air. The state calls it the arduous march, a phrase so soft and patriotic, it feels like someone trying to sell famine as character development. You call it what it is, a collapse. Kim Jong-il is now fully in charge. His father is embalmed, entombed in a palace, declared eternal president, which means technically no one ever replaces him. Kim Jong-il is simply General Secretary, Dear Leader, Supreme Commander, but never president. Because in North Korea, even death doesn't end a job. But let's not get distracted. The people are starving. Estimates vary because truth is illegal here, but most scholars agree that between 600,000 and 2 million people die between 1994 and 1998. From hunger, from cold, from diseases that wouldn't kill a healthy body, from eating bark, grass, corn husks, and worse, and from being forgotten. You follow a woman walking barefoot down a frozen dirt path with a sack of nothing. She once taught math. Now she scavenges for roots. Her son hasn't returned from the army. Her neighbor traded their last kitchen pot for a handful of spoiled rice. There are no tears, only dull resignation. You can't cry when your body is too weak to make salt. And still, portraits of the leaders hang in every home, wiped clean each morning. The regime insists the famine is caused by floods, then droughts, then U.S. sanctions, then traitors. But never policy, never isolation, never yucha. The narrative cannot break, even if the people do. Behind the scenes, Kim Jong-il is trying to hold it all together. Aid groups are allowed in, for a moment. The World Food Program distributes grain. China sends sacks of corn. South Korea cautiously offers rice, but most of the aid is funneled into the military or siphoned off by party elites. You pass a warehouse full of foreign rice guarded by soldiers with hollow cheeks. And then there are the Kyohwaso and Kwanliso, the labor camps. They expand during this period. If someone is caught hoarding grain, questioning policy, or even trying to flee to China, they vanish. Their family vanishes. Their name is erased. North Korea doesn't just punish the guilty, it punishes their bloodline. One man, accused of listening to a foreign radio broadcast, is imprisoned with his children. They grow up behind electric fences. No trial, no mercy, just silence. Still, there's resistance. People cross rivers into China. Many die. Some survive. Others are caught and sent back, where they're paraded in public as cautionary tales. But information begins to leak. Smuggled flash drives, secret leaflets, testimonies from defectors. The outside world starts to see beyond the parades, and what it sees is terrifying. Even so, Kim Jong-il survives politically. That's the most chilling part. His grip never weakens. If anything, it tightens. He revives mass games, forces loyalty pledges, creates a new branch of state ideology called Songun, military first. Now, not only is the army sacred, it is the heart of the nation. Soldiers eat first, soldiers travel first, soldiers enforce everything. And what little food remains goes to those who obey. Quirky fact for you? During this time, while the country starves, Kim Jong-il reportedly imports luxury cognac by the case and maintains private chefs trained in European cuisine. He lives in comfort, surrounded by films, fine art, and fear, while his people chew grass. In the capital, things are different. Pyongyang is a bubble, propped up with what's left of the state's strength. Residents are hand-picked for loyalty. Their shops still have some goods. Their schools still function. Their power cuts last minutes, not days. You walk through these streets and feel the surreal contrast. Marble monuments outside, empty stomachs just beyond the city line. And still, the regime's narrative holds. North Korea is strong, unified, righteous, a victim of enemies, a beacon of purity in a world of decay. People recite these lines even when they're too weak to stand. And sometimes, just sometimes, they believe it. When your world is this controlled, hope is not the enemy of despair. It is its twin. By the late 1990s, the famine eases slightly, thanks ironically to the black markets. Called Jangmadang, these informal markets spring up in every village. Run mostly by women, they trade goods, barter services, and rebuild fragments of local economy despite the regime's disapproval. Historians still argue whether these markets represent resistance or survival. One thing's certain, they are the beginning of a crack. A place where ideology loses to need. A place where food matters more than slogans. You leave the arduous march haunted, not just by the deaths, but by what they didn't change. Kim Jong-il remains untouched. His image beams from posters, now slightly more bloated. His speeches grow more dramatic, his regime more theatrical. And yet, in his shadows, something new is forming. A generation raised in hunger, fed on contradictions, whispering for the first time in decades, maybe this isn't how it's supposed to be. The new millennium arrives quietly in North Korea. No fireworks, no citywide countdown, no televised ball drop. Just another cold morning in Pyongyang, another round of speeches, and more portraits to be polished. But under the surface, change is humming, faintly, unevenly, like static on a forbidden radio. The country is still reeling from the famine. Entire regions remain hollowed out. Entire families are gone. Yet the regime acts as if nothing has changed, except one thing has: the people. You can feel it in the Jangmadang markets, now more permanent than provisional. You see it in the teenagers bartering cosmetics, the old men selling wire from dismantled power lines, the grandmothers grinding corn on makeshift stones. Something unthinkable is happening: commerce. Officially, it's illegal. Ideologically, it's treason. But practically, it's survival. And slowly, the state looks the other way, because even the regime knows you can't ration what doesn't exist. The black market economy grows. You visit one in Sinuiju near the Chinese border. There are Chinese rice cookers, pirated South Korean dramas on USB sticks, even knockoff Nike shoes. People trade with cigarettes, or soap, or gossip. The borders remain closed, but goods and ideas slip in through cracks. And that's when North Korea doubles down on control again. Kim Jong-il launches a new campaign of nuclear ambition. If the world won't feed North Korea, it will fear it. You're standing in a mountain valley near Yongbyon, where tunnels wind deep beneath the surface. Scientists work in silence. Concrete walls are lined with dials and blinking lights. Officially, it's a peaceful nuclear program. Unofficially, you know better. In 2003, North Korea withdraws from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Talks are proposed, then collapse. In 2006, you feel it, a deep rumble underground, not far from Punggye-ri. North Korea's first nuclear test. The world reacts with condemnation. Sanctions follow. But inside North Korea, it's declared a triumph. Proof that the country can defy the world and survive. Propaganda posters show missiles rising like dragons, aimed not at a specific enemy, but at everyone else. From now on, nukes become the shield and the sword. Still, Kim Jong-il doesn't live forever. By 2008, rumors swirl of his failing health. State media denies it, of course, but you can see it. The puffy face, the unsteady gait, the fewer public appearances. And behind him, just like last time, another shadow grows. His youngest son, Kim Jong-un. He's young. He's untested. He's practically unknown. And yet, by 2010, he's introduced at a party conference. Images of him are released. Stocky, short-haired, with the same family gaze. People whisper, he studied in Switzerland. He likes basketball. He's normal? Not quite. Because when Kim Jong-il dies in December 2011, Kim Jong-un becomes the third generation of supreme leadership. Young, unproven, and holding the nuclear codes. Fun fact, for days after Kim Jong-il's death, the country broadcasts nothing but mourning footage. People wail in public, collapse in tears, even beat their chests in orchestrated grief. But some don't, and cameras watch, and consequences follow. Still, the transfer of power is remarkably smooth, for a dictatorship. And within months, Kim Jong-un begins reshaping the regime in his own image. First, he purges military leaders, uncles, advisors, anyone who might question his youth or authority. Most famously, in 2013, he has Jang Song-thaek, his uncle and former mentor, executed, allegedly by anti-aircraft gun. Historians still argue whether the method was real or part of the regime's flair for theatrical rumor. Either way, the message was clear. I am not my father. I am worse. Then, he begins testing more missiles. The pace accelerates. The range increases. By 2017, North Korea claims it has an ICBM capable of reaching the U.S. mainland. Sirens sound in Tokyo. News tickers race in Seoul. The world holds its breath. And Kim Jong-un smiles, because for the first time, he has the global stage. But he wants more than fear. He wants legitimacy. And in 2018, the impossible happens. He meets with the President of the United States. You're watching it live. Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump shaking hands in Singapore. It's surreal. The body language is stiff. The smiles, rehearsed. But the symbolism, explosive. For North Korea, it's a propaganda jackpot. The supreme leader, accepted as an equal by the most powerful nation on earth. No deals come of it. No denuclearization. Just photos, handshakes, and later, a glossy documentary aired on North Korean television, narrated with all the drama of a space launch. Still, something has changed. Inside the country, smartphones appear. Government-approved, filtered, tracked. Roads are repaired. New skyscrapers rise in Pyongyang. Cafes open. Tourists, mostly Chinese, visit the capital and are shown carefully choreographed scenes of harmony. But step outside the capital and the illusion collapses. Villages remain impoverished. Infrastructure is fragile. Access to healthcare and electricity is inconsistent. The Songbun system remains intact. Surveillance is tighter than ever. Dissent is still death. The regime allows some capitalism, but only if it doesn't threaten control. A woman may sell vegetables, but not opinions. A man may open a bike repair shop, but not ask why the roads are crumbling. You watch a group of children in Pyongyang practicing synchronized dance beneath a banner of Kim Jong-un. Their timing is perfect, their faces blank, they move like clockwork. And maybe that's the best metaphor for this moment. Movement without direction. A country that spins, flexes, and parades, not toward freedom, but away from vulnerability. North Korea has survived famine, isolation, global scorn, and dynastic transition. But at what cost? You walk through a city built on silence, lit by neon, shadowed by fear. And you know, this isn't the end of the story. It never is. By now, you've come to understand that time flows differently in North Korea. Outside, the world races ahead, tech revolutions, social media, Mars rovers. Inside, the rhythm stays the same, marches, slogans, banners flapping under solemn portraits. But listen closely, and you'll hear the gears grinding, slowly, relentlessly. Behind the stillness, the machine is evolving. You're in Pyongyang again, but it looks different. Glass towers shimmer by the Mirai Scientists Street, part of Kim Jong-un's push to modernize the capital. Everything's painted in hopeful pastels, mint green, baby blue, soft yellow. State media calls it a sci-tech renaissance. The world calls it optics. There are more cars now, more LED billboards, even an amusement park with a roller coaster that squeaks with well-meaning decay. But step just a few blocks outside the showcase zone, and you see it, cracks in the facade, crumbling stairwells, flickering lights, stores filled with plastic fruit in the window, but almost nothing on the shelves. Still, people are adapting. Those once illegal Jangmadang markets have become semi-official. The government even taxes them. Farmers smuggle goods to urban centers. Traders carry Chinese electronics tucked beneath blankets on motorcycles. A black market for SIM cards, solar panels, South Korean soap operas, yes, even foreign K-dramas, thrives like mushrooms in a dark forest. And with this new flow of goods comes something more dangerous: information. Foreign TV shows show people in the South living lives unimaginable to most in the North, eating well, dressing fashionably, laughing freely. For many North Koreans, this is the first time they realize we are not the lucky half. It's a quiet rebellion, this awakening. And yet the regime doesn't collapse. Why? Because even as North Koreans trade, hustle, and peek across the information curtain, they still live under the boot of an omniscient surveillance state. Every neighborhood is still governed by local informants. Every workplace still requires loyalty pledges. Every mistake is not just yours, it's your family's, your child's, your grandchild's. It's hard to rebel when you know the punishment lasts 3 generations. And here's a darkly fascinating tidbit. In some areas, young people watch pirated K-dramas with the sound off and someone reading the subtitles aloud, because if the police burst in, they can pretend it's just a book club. North Korea has weaponized even silence. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un keeps playing the international game. One step forward, two missiles back. In 2019, he meets Donald Trump again, this time at the DMZ. The handshake is brief, the symbolism enormous. Kim becomes the first North Korean leader to cross into South Korea, if only for a few moments. Cameras flash, reporters gush. And again, inside North Korea, the footage is replayed like a scene from an epic film. But no real progress follows. Talks stall, sanctions remain, and Kim returns to what he knows. Fireworks and fear, the missile tests continue. Some soar over Japan, others crash into the sea. Each one is a message, loud, defiant, but increasingly predictable. The world condemns, then forgets, then waits for the next launch. Inside North Korea, life grinds on. You visit a rural clinic near Hamhung. The electricity cuts out mid-procedure. The nurse continues under flashlight. The shelves are lined with empty pill bottles. Patients whisper gratitude for aspirin. In schools, children recite verses praising Kim Jong-un's leadership during difficult times. The difficult times are never named, but everyone knows. Then, in 2020, a new enemy arrives, COVID-19. The virus that humbled powerful nations terrifies the North Korean regime. The borders, already tight, snap shut completely. Trade with China plummets. Smuggling slows. Markets wither. Foreign diplomats are sent home. The country becomes more isolated than ever, even more than during the famine. Officially, North Korea claims 0 COVID cases. Health officials parade in hazmat suits for the cameras. Streets are sprayed with disinfectant. Emergency hospitals appear overnight. But on the ground, stories differ. Some defectors speak of quiet mass graves, of entire villages quarantined without supplies, of symptoms that sound familiar: fever, breathlessness, silence. In Pyongyang, the fear isn't just about the virus. It's about control slipping. With trade frozen and foreign aid absent, even the capital begins to feel the strain. Rations are cut, prices spike. The regime blames hostile forces and global conspiracies. But people are no longer as quick to believe. Another subtle rebellion brews: sarcasm. A whispered joke about the marshal's weight. A comparison between K-pop and state music. A question about why imported beer tastes better. Small things, harmless things, until they aren't, because repression remains airtight. A university student caught with a foreign USB is sentenced to labor. A housewife who failed to bow to a portrait is publicly shamed. A man found near the border with foreign cash disappears. And yet, in the shadows, hope smolders. A young girl memorizes a K-drama theme song. A boy repairs a Chinese smartphone by candlelight. A mother sells rice at a hidden stall, using her earnings to buy a solar panel. These aren't protests, but they are cracks in the wall. And Kim Jong-un? He reappears in public after rumors of illness. Slimmer, still smiling, still clapping at missile launches. But his expression has changed. Less amused, more burdened. The regime strengthens cyber divisions. It ramps up border patrols. It arrests more, shows less. But there's a twitch beneath the surface, a nervousness, a realization that fear doesn't quite work like it used to. You walk through Kaesong, the border city once used for North-South cooperation. It's quiet now. Empty factories, rusted gates, but a child draws on a wall with chalk an image of two people shaking hands. You wonder if she knows what it means. Or maybe she hopes it's real. The road ahead narrows, not physically, but politically, emotionally, even philosophically. You're not just walking through North Korea anymore. You're walking through a myth that's slowly starting to question itself, though only behind closed doors and never out loud. It's 2021 now. The pandemic still rages outside. The borders of North Korea remain sealed like the lid of a pressure cooker. And inside, life grows more strained, more watchful, more strange. You arrive in Hisan, a border city near China once buzzing with underground trade. Now it's eerily quiet. Smugglers are gone. Prices have tripled. And the black markets that once helped the population survive are being systematically dismantled. Not just physically, ideologically. The state begins pushing a new campaign. Anti-reactionary thought. You see it plastered on walls. Reject foreign influence. Purify your spirit. Obey the marshal. But this isn't just about Western media or capitalism. It's about haircuts, slang, even how tightly your pants fit. Yes, the regime launches crackdowns on fashion trends deemed decadent. Skinny jeans, dyed hair, and K-pop hairstyles are banned. Watching South Korean dramas is now punishable by death. And the people? They nod. They comply. They say the right things. And still they whisper. Because the real threat to North Korea isn't war. It's leakage of ideas, of lifestyles, of comparisons. For decades, the regime claimed North Korea was superior to the South. But now, bootleg USBs show a different world. Korean supermarkets that overflow, cities that glow at night, pop stars with freedom in their eyes. Young people begin to ask forbidden questions. If they are starving, why do they smile? If we are victorious, why are we afraid? If our leader is divine, why does he age? Of course, they never ask these questions aloud. That would be suicide. But they ask each other, quietly, carefully, beneath the soft hum of illegal radios. Kim Jong-un sees this too, and he reacts the only way the regime knows how: more control. In 2021, the government enacts sweeping new laws: 15 years for possessing foreign media, execution for distributing it, heavy surveillance in schools, especially targeting students suspected of foreign influence. Teachers are instructed to monitor not just academic performance, but expressions of loyalty. Parents are required to confess their children's ideological errors publicly. The Songbun system becomes even more entrenched. Being from a wavering family line is enough to deny you education, housing, and medicine. And yet, the regime is uneasy. Because for all the threats, the old spell doesn't work quite like before. People cry at state funerals, yes. They chant at parades. They attend loyalty sessions. But the gleam in their eyes is duller. They've seen too much. Meanwhile, the country faces another crisis: food shortages. Again. Floods wipe out crops. Sanctions tighten. Fertilizer and fuel are scarce. The borders are still sealed from COVID paranoia. The economy teeters. You visit a rural town in North Hamgyong. Farmers scratch at dry earth with rusted tools. Children eat corn gruel when it's available. A local official tells you, with a rehearsed smile, that the harvest will be glorious. Behind him, there is no harvest. Kim Jong-un himself, now noticeably thinner, appears on state TV to admit the country is facing its worst hardship since the war. That's not normal. In a nation of eternal victory, admitting difficulty is rare. He appears vulnerable. Some say even human. Then comes the spectacle. The military parades. You're back in Kim Il-sung Square watching fireworks and formations, each soldier a dot in a colossal human mosaic. Giant missiles roll past. Marching bands thunder. Citizens weep with pride, or appear to. But there's something missing. The roar. The enthusiasm is there, but thinner. You wonder, do they cry because they believe? Or because they remember what happens if they don't? A strange tidbit from this time. Kim Jong-un revives the practice of public struggle sessions, especially among students. Teenagers are made to stand in front of their classmates and confess wrongdoings, watching a film, humming a K-pop song, using South Korean slang. Their friends are required to criticize them. It's like a social media cancellation, but offline, mandatory, and soul-crushing. And yet, despite all of this, the regime remains. Because fear, if applied consistently, works. Because tradition, if taught early enough, roots deep. Because isolation, if absolute, blinds completely. Still, the erosion continues. In 2022, balloons launched from the South carry leaflets, flash drives, and even dollar bills. Some are intercepted, others land. In homes across the north, people gather quietly to watch what these tiny invaders reveal. Footage of Seoul, news of Ukraine, footage of Kim Jong-un. Not smiling. Each glimpse chips away at the fortress, and even the leader seems aware of it. In recent appearances, Kim Jong-un is more reserved. He walks slower. His speeches lean heavily on legacy, grandfather, father, loyalty, struggle. He talks about hostile forces, foreign contamination, and Korean purity. But his eyes flicker, just slightly. Because the system he inherited is still powerful, but no longer invincible. And in the shadows of power, a new question begins to whisper. What happens when belief is no longer enough? You wake to the low groan of engines echoing across a barren highway. Dawn filters through a haze of industrial smoke. You're in North Pyongan province, moving through the industrial belt once hailed as the iron backbone of the socialist miracle. But now, the machinery stutters. Conveyor belts creak. The paint on factory walls flakes off like old propaganda. This is the ghost of ambition. The 2000s arrive with weight. The world reels from COVID, climate, and conflict. But North Korea? It does what it always does. Tightens. Borders, still locked. Sanctions, unrelenting. Outside aid, non-existent. You walk into a coal processing plant that hasn't produced at capacity in years. Dust coats everything. Workers sit idle, waiting not for orders but electricity. When you ask what they're doing, one replies, flatly, "We are waiting for the sun to rise on Hoosh again." That's not poetry. That's programming. But let's talk about the economy, the part most regimes want to brag about. In North Korea, it's a fragile hybrid now. The central plan still exists, still issues quotas and speeches. But underneath it, like roots beneath pavement, market activity is flourishing. Illegally, quietly, efficiently. Those Jangmadang markets we've been walking through, they're now a permanent part of life. Women, yes, mostly women, run them. Mothers, daughters, grandmothers. They trade Chinese goods, local produce, plastic sandals, used DVDs, homemade soap, even contraband cosmetics from South Korea. They're referred to as the engine of survival. Historians still debate whether these women are accidental capitalists or quiet revolutionaries. But one thing's clear. If the state collapses, it won't be the soldiers or the officials who keep things going. It'll be the women with calloused hands and hidden ledgers. And Kim Jong-un? He knows this. That's why in 2023, the government tries to reassert control over private trade. Currency reforms are whispered, new surveillance introduced, more party loyalty required for business licenses. But it's a delicate balance. Crush the markets, and you invite hunger. Let them grow, and ideology erodes. You feel the tension in every interaction. A market vendor bows to a passing official, her smile practiced. A student eyes a smartphone in a locked display case, knowing he'll never afford it. A soldier watches everyone, eyes darting like he's been told something is coming. But he doesn't know what. There's a new kind of fear now, not of punishment, but of uncertainty. North Korea was once a machine built for predictability, but when you rely on fear for too long, you forget how to inspire. And when the fear begins to dull, all you have left is rust. Another quiet change emerges. The language of loyalty is thinning. Once, slogans rang out from every billboard, "Let's work miracles under the guidance of the Marshal." Now, more abstract phrases like, "The future is ours." Once, portraits of Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung appeared side by side in every room. Now, just Kim Jong-un, clean, solo, streamlined. Some interpret this as consolidation, others as rebranding, a dictator in an age of diminishing returns. North Koreans born after 2000 didn't grow up with famine, war, or revolution. They grew up with restriction. They don't remember the glorious struggle. They remember empty shelves and whispered jokes, which leads us to a strange phenomenon: youth culture in a vacuum. Teenagers begin imitating Southern trends in secret. Certain schools confiscate foreign-style pens and stickers. A growing number of students are arrested for using South Korean slang. There are even re-education programs targeting non-patriotic walking styles. Yes, you heard that right. How you move your body could betray your ideology. It's absurd. It's real. It's working. For now. But something new is brewing. Something the state fears more than foreign troops: cognitive dissonance. Imagine being told every day that you live in the greatest country on earth, then secretly watching videos of Seoul's bustling subways, neon malls, clean hospitals, smiling students. Imagine being told the South is a land of starvation and crime, then seeing people there walk their dogs in parks the size of your entire neighborhood. Over time, your mind splits. One half obeys, the other questions. And what happens when the questioning half starts to win? You walk past a schoolhouse where children chant 10,000 years to the marshal. But behind the building, two teens are quietly swapping earbuds, sharing an audio file of K-pop. They don't talk, they don't smile, but in their eyes, something flickers. And yet, the regime adapts. Kim Jong-un launches more cyber operations. Hackers target cryptocurrency markets, foreign banks, even hospitals. These hackers are trained from a young age. Gifted students pulled from schools, raised in isolated academies, taught not just programming, but infiltration. It's war without uniforms, theft without borders. Quirky fact? North Korea's cyber division is believed to fund a major portion of the regime's economy now, through ransomware, theft, and illicit crypto mining. It's Juche 2.0. Meanwhile, missile tests continue. 2022, 2023, 2024. They're louder, longer range, more sophisticated. Some analysts suggest North Korea could now launch a nuclear strike within hours. Others say the real threat is no longer military, it's psychological. The unpredictability itself is the weapon. You stand at the DMZ again, staring through binoculars. Across the line, tourists wave from the south. Behind you, a soldier clears his throat. You turn. He says nothing, but he watches you walk away. No one is allowed to stare too long at the other side, because eventually you start to wonder, why is the enemy so free? You move farther north now, toward the jagged mountains that hug the Chinese border, tall, mist-wrapped spines that have always offered both protection and escape. The wind carries more than just cold here. It carries stories, desperation, rumors, and sometimes people. Because this is where defection begins. The Tumen River and the Yalu River, two lifelines, two fault lines, narrow enough in some spots to cross with a strong kick and a desperate prayer. For many North Koreans, these waters represent the only door out, but they also represent the tightest choke point in the entire country. You crouch near the banks of the Tumen and watch a man and his sister slip across in the dark, clothes tied above their knees, holding hands like they're 5 years old again. They vanish into the Chinese forest. They may make it, or they may not. Because getting out of North Korea is just the start. China doesn't offer asylum. In fact, it actively returns defectors. And when they're sent back, torture, camps, execution, not just for them, but sometimes for their families. It's a terrifying game of tag, and the prize is freedom. Still, people run. Why? Because they've seen things, heard things, felt the shift. In recent years, defector testimonies have changed in tone. In the 1990s and early 2000s, people fled because of starvation. Now, many flee because of disillusionment. They've tasted underground media, they've compared lives, they've asked questions, And for the regime, this is more dangerous than any drone or foreign spy. You sit in a small apartment in Seoul with a woman who escaped in 2015. She teaches you how to cook North Korean-style noodles and tells you, between steps, that the scariest part wasn't running. It was pretending to believe for 20 years, that pretending every day wasn't safety, it was erosion. Back in the north, the government knows the borders are vulnerable, so it fortifies them, not with fences, but with ideology. People are taught that defectors are criminals, traitors, mentally ill. In cartoons, they're drawn with pointy ears and broken teeth. Teachers warn students that anyone caught speaking with a defector's family will be labeled hostile class. The punishment? Lifelong poverty. Or worse. And yet, defectors continue to send messages back. Phone calls on smuggled Chinese SIMs, cash hidden in shipments of clothes, flash drives loaded with family videos. Some North Koreans have started calling these messages from the other side of the wall. And for many, it's the first time they realize the wall is not made of bricks. It's made of lies. Still, for every person who escapes, thousands remain, trapped not just by the government, but by circumstance. Most North Koreans have no savings, no connections, no map. They've lived their entire lives on ration cards and recitations. For them, imagining a life elsewhere is like imagining a second moon. This is by design. The regime spends billions on control infrastructure, Inminban neighborhood watch units, mobile surveillance apps, daily loyalty check-ins, self-criticism sessions at schools and workplaces. You attend one of these sessions in a Pyongyang textile mill. A young woman stands, tears brimming, confessing that she forgot to bow to a portrait of Kim Jong-il. She swears it was an accident. Her co-workers nod, then accuse her of arrogance. She nods too, thanking them for their vigilance. And when it's done, she returns to her station, just a little smaller than before. It's not just physical oppression, it's emotional erosion. You never know who will report you, or why, or when. And yet, you see a strange resilience in the people, in the cracks. Teachers who secretly skip the worst propaganda slides. Doctors who let patients speak freely behind closed doors. Grandparents who whisper stories from the past, before the war, before the division, before the statues. There's one story you hear again and again, reunification. Despite everything, despite the war, the walls, the wire, many North Koreans still carry the belief that Korea is one country, one people. They may fear the South, they may envy it, but deep down something ancient remains, the idea that the line can vanish. Kim Jong-un, of course, weaponizes this. He uses it in speeches. "We are brothers," he says, "but the South is infected." It's a strange dichotomy, love and hatred braided together like a noose. You remember 2018, when the leaders of the North and South met. There were handshakes, tears, a walk across the DMZ hand in hand. Hope bloomed like cherry blossoms. But now? That hope feels like a postcard someone forgot to mail. The pandemic, the missile tests, the border closures, they've all pushed the two Koreas further apart again. Communication lines cut, agreements suspended. The propaganda turns nastier. South Korean politicians become punchlines on state TV. And yet, when balloons drift over the border, carrying USBs, letters, rice, the people look up and wonder. You visit a school near Wonsan. A teacher shows students a map of the peninsula, fully read, no line down the middle. She calls it our sacred land. The students nod, but one boy, maybe 10, whispers to another, "My uncle says the South has food for dogs that's better than our dinner." They laugh. Quietly. But they laugh, and that's the point. Laughter in this place is rebellion. And rebellion, no matter how small, is the beginning of change. You stand at the edge of a rural field, early morning fog curling over the furrows like breath from an exhausted animal. Somewhere, a rooster crows, not in triumph, but in routine. A woman stoops to plant cabbage seeds, glancing up as a government van trundles past. Inside it, loudspeakers, blasting slogans like seeds of their own, planting something very different in the minds of the people. Trust the marshal. Our hardships are noble. Self-reliance is victory. The messages never change, but the people hearing them have. In this new chapter of North Korea's story, you begin to notice something peculiar. Not resistance in the streets, no, that's too dangerous, but resistance in posture, in expression, in how long people wait to clap. It's as if they're all still following the script, but reading their lines with less conviction. This is the age of quiet drift. Kim Jong-un, now in his second decade of rule, is no longer the unknown boy king. He is fully grown, fully installed, and fully aware that the world sees through the theater. But he presses on, because to admit the cracks is to let the whole facade collapse. And so, the spectacle continues. Another missile test, another military parade, another round of negotiations that go nowhere. In 2025, the state unveils new nuclear-capable missiles, paraded through Kim Il-sung Square in eerie silence, save for the pounding drums and choreographed salutes. The people watching wear forced smiles. The soldiers march as if every step keeps the sky from falling. But behind closed doors, officials are more anxious. International sanctions have worn down not just trade routes, but trust. Even China, long North Korea's most dependable ally, grows wary. Trade slows, assistance dwindles, and Pyongyang begins quietly reaching out to alternative partners. Iran, Syria, a few African governments willing to barter ideology for weapons. You walk through a new apartment block in the capital, shown proudly by a local guide. Everything is spotless. Elevators work. Showers run. The windows are large and bright. But here's the catch. Only elite families live here. People with impeccable songbun, party ties, and unshakable loyalty. Just a few streets away, another building crumbles. The elevator is broken. Water is rationed. The windows are plastic sheeting nailed to wood. This dual reality has a name among defectors. Potemkin Pyongyang. A city within a city. A dream layered over a waking life. Still, life in Pyongyang is better than elsewhere. In the provinces, people struggle for basic medicine. One aspirin goes for 10 days' wages. Clinics reuse needles. Electricity runs only a few hours a day. And the border? Still locked. Officially for health reasons, unofficially because ideas are contagious. In these conditions, faith becomes currency. You visit a university class in political science. The professor speaks solemnly about socialist superiority and hostile imperialist provocations. Students take notes. But when the class ends, one whispers to another, "I heard there's a new drama smuggled from the South, about rich people who don't shout when they're angry." It's not the content that matters. It's the contrast. Because what North Koreans are really craving isn't wealth. It's calm, dignity, the ability to exist without fear. But fear is still the regime's fuel. In 2026, the party introduces a new surveillance measure, facial recognition systems installed in schools, train stations, and hospitals. It's branded as progress. In truth, it's a way to measure emotional compliance. Cameras scan crowds, not just for attendance, but for attitude. Smile too little? Flagged? Cheer too late? Watched? Skip a rally? Interviewed. This dystopia doesn't come with stormtroopers. It comes with software and silence. And then, in the same year, something strange happens. Kim Jong-un disappears for 2 months. No public appearances, no statements, no images. State media runs archival footage. Analysts speculate. Surgery, illness, even death. The people hold their breath, not in fear but in wonder. Could the system survive without him? Eventually, he reemerges. Thinner, smiling faintly. The official story? He was working tirelessly for the nation's defense. But the people know better. And they file this moment away in their minds. Another glitch in the matrix. You speak to a university janitor in Pyongyang. He says softly, "The marshal is wise, but he must be tired." Then he looks down, realizing he's said too much. He changes the subject to cleaning supplies. Even here, kindness is a risk. Meanwhile, the black market thrives. Children carry smartphones with music apps that work offline. Housewives trade foreign detergents behind schools. Old men share cigarettes and whispered news from illegal radios. The state tries to keep up, but it's like chasing shadows with a net. Still, propaganda adapts. Now, it doesn't just speak of strength, it speaks of legacy. The new slogans echo older ones. Let us build a nation worthy of our ancestors. Defend the bloodline of Mount Paektu. The message is clear. Don't just fear the marshal, protect his memory. This is how authoritarianism evolves. It becomes ancestral. You find yourself in a school assembly, watching students pledge loyalty not just to Kim Jong-un, but to his unborn heirs. They haven't been named. They may not even exist. But already, the next chapter is being prepared. And yet, despite all of this, despite the suffocating control, the curated illusions, the crackling microphones repeating the same tired verses, you can't help but feel something rising. Not rebellion, not yet, but tiredness, a national exhaustion, a longing that even the party's loudspeakers can't drown out anymore. The people aren't plotting. They're enduring. They're watching. They're waiting. Not for revolution, but for something to give. And in the hush that follows the parade, the missile launch, the next famine warning, you swear you can hear it. The sound of a country holding its breath. You travel east now, through cracked highways and coastal winds, until you arrive in the once promoted city of Wonsan, Kim Jong-un's chosen tourism zone. Resorts rise along the beach, colorful murals boast about new hotels, and banners flutter with cheerful slogans. Let the world discover our beauty. But there are no tourists, just guards, sand, and silence. This is the paradox of modern North Korea. Projects are built with great fanfare, ski resorts, water parks, shiny condominiums. But most are ghost shells, constructed for cameras, opened for propaganda, operated for no one. You stroll through a deserted boardwalk, painted in cheerful pastels. Loudspeakers play orchestral music to no crowd at all. A lone caretaker sweeps endlessly, his eyes blank, his broom moving on autopilot. You ask if many foreigners come here. He shrugs. They say they will. Someday. That someday never seems to arrive. But it's not just the resorts. It's everywhere. You see a theater in Pyongyang with velvet seats and no electricity. A train station so vast and pristine, you expect a crowd. But there's no train, no schedule, no movement. It's not infrastructure. It's performance. The illusion of progress, frozen in concrete and plaster. Meanwhile, in the villages outside the city, people burn wood for heat. They cook rice over stoves made from oil drums. School children write with pencil stubs on reused paper. And yet, on state television, the storyline continues. North Korea is strong. North Korea is rising. The world is envious. The regime has become a magician of sorts, mastering distraction, building fantasies, relying on repetition to blur the edges between real and unreal. But the people are not blind. They're just busy surviving. Take the case of Sun Hee, a 26-year-old woman running a clothing stall in an unofficial market near Kangi. She's not a rebel. She doesn't speak against the regime. She bows when required. But she also bribes border guards, hides South Korean face cream under the floorboards, and watches Chinese dramas at night under a thick blanket of silence. You ask her if she believes the state media. She smiles without looking at you. Belief is for people with full stomachs. Her world isn't ideological, it's practical. Keep your head down. Don't attract attention. Smile when told. Trade when possible. This, right here, is the real revolution. Apathetic obedience. The regime, for all its efforts, cannot reignite the kind of ideological fervor that existed under Kim Il-sung, not even under Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-un rules not with devotion, but inertia. People no longer cry when he speaks. They yawn. They scroll through contraband phones. They plan quietly for a life that doesn't involve loyalty pledges. And that terrifies the regime, so it builds more monuments. You visit the Samjian Development Zone near Mount Paektu, the mythical birthplace of the Kim dynasty. It's been transformed into a socialist utopia. Wide boulevards, hotels, museums. Snow glistens on rooftops under carefully maintained neon signs. But again, no one's really there. Just tour guides rehearsing facts, students marching in formation, and workers pretending to mop floors that never get dirty. You ask a young museum docent how often real visitors come. She answers with a smile so tight it could snap. Every day. In our hearts. Mount Paektu itself remains sacred. Its snowy peak looms in propaganda, textbooks, murals, even national seals. The regime claims Kim Jong-il was born there, under a double rainbow and a shooting star. Historians, of course, place his actual birth in a Soviet camp. But in the North, myth outranks fact. That's not a bug, it's a feature. You begin to notice how deeply myth has wrapped around reality. It's in the way newscasters cry when reading state reports. It's in how military officers speak of the great enemy to the south with phrases rehearsed from childhood. It's in textbooks that describe Kim Jong-un as a genius before he could walk, and satellites as gifts to the heavens. And yet, the myths are thinner now, glossier, lacking the marrow of belief they once had. They exist because they must, but they echo rather than convince. Inside people's heads, something new is growing. Not rebellion, not ideology, just questions. In a university dormitory, you overhear two students debating, why are we poor if we're so strong? Why can't we use the internet like other countries? If they're lying about this, what else? They speak in code. They never name the marshal. They never curse. But the skepticism is unmistakable, and this generation is different. They've grown up with USB drives and whispered jokes, with mothers who trade goods under the radar and fathers who bribe officials to get medicines. They don't believe the system works. They just hope it won't notice them. That's what makes them dangerous, not for what they do, but for what they've stopped doing. They don't revere. They don't trust. They don't dream in red anymore. The regime knows this, so it pushes harder. More parades, more threats, more missiles, more murals, more eyes watching every corner. And yet, even as the show grows louder, the audience grows quieter. You walk through a street in Pyongyang at dusk. The lights flicker. A mother pulls her child away from a portrait of Kim Jong-un. Gently but firmly. They don't stop to bow. Maybe they're in a hurry, or maybe they're done pretending. You're walking now through Chongjin, the city of iron and steel, once proudly hailed as an industrial fortress of the revolution. In its prime, this northeastern city clanged with factory bells, chimneys puffed with purpose, and workers marched with fists in the air and purpose in their eyes. Now, it's quieter. The factory walls are cracked. The slogans have faded. The air smells of coal dust and fish, salted fish, drying on wires between apartment balconies like surrender flags. You pass rows of workers shuffling home with their lunch tins, still stamped with the red star, now half filled with cornmeal and resignation. Chongjin represents something important. Not just decline, but delay. A place that still runs on old promises and broken machinery. It's here that you realize North Korea isn't collapsing. It's decaying, slowly, unevenly, like a building with a beautiful facade and rotting beams. But the regime, it adapts. In the early 2030s, as sanctions drag on and foreign trade remains crippled, Kim Jong-un's government rolls out new internal programs aimed at economic self-revival. State media calls it the New Path campaign. You'd expect factories, exports, investment. Instead, more slogans, More reorganization, more committees, another campaign to eliminate corruption, which mostly means purging mid-level officials who didn't clap hard enough. But here's the twist. Some changes do appear. Electric buses in Pyongyang, new market stalls with laminated price tags, an app, yes, an app, that lets citizens register for work assignments provided they pass loyalty screenings first. A kind of digitized juche, updated just enough to make the illusion feel new again. And all of this, wrapped in the language of modernity. Kim Jong-un gives speeches about protecting the environment and improving living standards. He appears more polished, more curated. His suits fit better. His speeches are shorter. He smiles more, always just long enough. But the people? They're not buying it. Because what good is a digital future when your electricity is still rationed? What good is an electric bus if you can't afford rice? You enter a home in South Hwanghae province, where 3 generations live in a 2-room flat. The walls are decorated with state calendars and the required portraits, but the eyes of the family flicker elsewhere, toward the market, toward the horizon, toward anywhere but the television. The grandfather speaks softly. We used to believe because we had no choice. Now we pretend because belief is too expensive. It's not defiance. It's arithmetic. But that's the danger, isn't it? When millions of people start pretending at the same time, a system begins to hollow from within. This is where you see it most. In language. The people still speak in the same phrases. Thanks to the marshal. Under the guidance of the party. With juche in our hearts. But their tone has shifted. The cadence is faster. The words carry no weight. They recite, like actors in a play that no longer sells tickets. Even among officials, a kind of quiet fatigue is setting in. You sit in on a provincial planning meeting where bureaucrats argue about cement rations. One sighs audibly when the chairman invokes the revolutionary spirit of Kim Il-sungism, Kim Jong-ilism. It's not that they disagree. It's that they're tired. And tired people don't overthrow regimes, but they don't protect them either. Meanwhile, North Korea continues its international performance. Another missile test, this one hypersonic. Another satellite launch, this one allegedly for weather data. Another military drill, this one with underwater drones. The message is the same. Look at us. We're strong, we're sovereign, we're untouchable. But fewer people are watching. Even in South Korea, where once every missile launch sparked national panic, there's now resignation. International media moves on faster. Sanctions continue. Diplomats shrug. And Kim Jong-un? He watches this carefully. So he pivots again. Enter the charm offensive. North Korea begins inviting more foreign visitors. Select journalists, fringe politicians, tech entrepreneurs. Tours are staged, carefully controlled. They see clean streets, rehearsed children, and perfectly timed musical numbers. You watch one of these tours from the background, behind a curtain with the translator. The visitors eat cold noodles, pose for photos, praise the hospitality. But later, one asks quietly, "Is there any truth here?" The translator doesn't answer. He just smiles. Because he knows. Truth in North Korea isn't what's real, it's what survives. Meanwhile, underground Christianity continues to spread. Quietly, dangerously. House churches hidden behind farming equipment. Psalms whispered under candlelight. Some believe these groups will one day form a resistance. Most just pray for food and rain. And in schools? Students continue to be taught about the evil imperialists of the South and the genius leadership of the Kims. But in private? They memorize the lyrics to forbidden love songs, play makeshift video games on hacked Chinese tablets, and trade jokes that would get their grandparents executed. It's slow, but it's spreading, because the most dangerous virus isn't COVID, it's doubt. Doubt that South Koreans are starving. Doubt that Americans fear North Korea. Doubt that the marshal can hear your thoughts. And once that seed takes root, no amount of marching songs can make it die. You return to Pyongyang, and watch a university graduation. The students chant, the banners rise, the marshal's face glows from a massive screen. And yet, when the ceremony ends, the students scatter, not to their assignments, but to the markets, to the shadows, to the small corners of life where truth peeks through the cracks. And one, just one, turns to you and says, "I don't think we're what they say we are anymore." Then she's gone. Night falls over Pyongyang, not suddenly, but like a curtain gently lowering after a long, tedious play. Streetlights flicker on, weakly. A few drones buzz overhead, slow, deliberate, like lazy fireflies programmed to scan rather than shine. You're walking the edge of Ryomyong Street, the new green boulevard built to prove that North Korea is modern, clean, sustainable. It looks impressive. Solar panels on the rooftops, electric buses in idle, neon-lit slogans glowing in pastel blue, "Forward to our bright future." But walk around the back of these buildings and you find the truth. Trash bins welded shut, elevators that haven't worked in months, water tanks filled only on Tuesdays. You ask a maintenance worker why the lights in the lobby are always on but the apartments remain dark. He shrugs. For the cameras. That's the truth of it now. So much is for the cameras. North Korea in the 2030s is no longer the hermit of the 1990s. It's curated, a performance designed to maintain control by managing perception, not just externally, but internally. People aren't told to believe anymore. They're told to appear to believe. And that appearance? It's enforced with precision. At a loyalty inspection center, you witness a strange scene. Government officials reviewing citizen portraits. Not photographs of the people, but of their portraits of Kim Jong-un. Citizens are required to frame and hang an official image of the supreme leader in their home. But now, inspectors come monthly to check for dust. If there's any dust on the frame, a fine. If the portrait is slightly off-level, a warning. If a fingerprint smudges the glass, you might disappear for a self-reflection course. It's surveillance by cleanliness. You speak to a retired artist, once commissioned to sculpt busts of the Kim dynasty. He chuckles softly. They used to ask me to capture his eyes. Now they ask me to soften his jawline. Even dictatorship has branding. But beneath this curated image, things are shifting. The economy is no longer truly socialist, nor truly capitalist. It's something else, transactional totalitarianism. Everyone is trading something. Cigarettes for favors, rice for silence, USB sticks for trust. Loyalty now is just another currency. Take Jong-soo, a black market broker in Sariwon. He sells imported solar batteries and toothpaste laced with mint that tastes like South Korea. You ask if he's afraid. He replies, "The police eat from my stall. I give them extra batteries." They look away. It's not ideology anymore. It's leverage. And this new model, it's holding, for now. But it's fragile. Because what happens when leverage fails? What happens when there's nothing left to trade? You pass a primary school. The children are singing again. But this time, it's not a loyalty anthem. It's a song about happiness. The lyrics are oddly generic. You wonder if it was borrowed from another country and just translated. Then you notice the chorus, "Our dreams are ours, and no one can take them." A teacher glances at you, not suspiciously, just long enough to let you know she noticed that you noticed. Even the songs are changing. But perhaps the most significant shift you feel is this. The fear is less immediate now, but more permanent, like background radiation. Everyone knows the rules. Everyone adjusts. Everyone avoids sudden movements, suspicious friendships, loud emotions. Not because they're being watched constantly, but because they've been trained to assume they are. That's the genius and the horror of North Korea's evolution. The system no longer needs to crush you. It just needs to convince you to crouch on your own. But in every crouch, there's a question. And questions once seated never truly die. In secret notebooks, children draw maps of the world. ones that show borders the regime denies. In basement apartments, old grandmothers whisper prayers in defiance of official atheism. In the back corners of state factories, workers use scrap parts to build radios, hoping to catch the voice of a world that doesn't speak in slogans. The regime, sensing this quiet drift, fights back not with innovation, but repetition. New murals, new loyalty days, new laws. In 2035, they unveil a massive new monument in Namfo, a spiraling column of bronze topped with a flame said to burn with the wisdom of 3 generations. You attend the unveiling. The crowd cheers on cue, fireworks launch, drones swirl in a perfect grid. But as you walk away, a boy tugs at his father's sleeve. "Papa, what's the fire made of?" His father hesitates. He looks up at the flame, then down at his son, and he says quietly, "Old promises." That's when you know. The regime still stands. The parades still march. The portraits still shine. But the people? They are drifting, not running, not fighting, just drifting, away from belief, away from fear, toward something quieter, slower, more dangerous, disinterest. And when enough people stop caring, not about obedience, but about the narrative itself, then the story begins to die. Not with a bang, but with a long, echoing silence. Morning in North Korea begins not with an alarm clock, but with a loudspeaker. Every neighborhood, every block, school, factory, and collective farm has one. At precisely 6 a.m., it crackles to life with revolutionary music. Horns, choirs, the same hymn you've heard 1,000 times before. You're not allowed to sleep through it. That's the point. But now, even the music sounds tired. The trumpet lines falter. The cassette recording wobbles. Somewhere along the line, even the propaganda has grown weary of itself. You walk through Haeju, a southern port city that rarely makes the headlines. It's dusty, modest, forgotten. The locals here trade salt and silence. One of them, a shoemaker with hands like dry bark, tells you, "We do not suffer anymore. We endure." And that, you realize, is the new national ethic. Not victory, not glory, just endurance. But endurance has a side effect, memory. And memory, once awakened, becomes dangerous. In the countryside, older citizens begin telling different stories. Not ones about Kim Jong-il's genius or Kim Jong-un's mercy, but stories from before. Before the war, before the split, even before the statues. They talk about gods, ghosts, seasons. They talk about harvest dances and mountain spirits, about how once people laughed without permission. These stories aren't banned. They're just discouraged, not useful, not loyal. But they spread like wind through rice fields, too quiet to catch, too fast to stop. Meanwhile, the new elite rise quietly in Pyongyang. These are the children of high-ranking officials, foreign-educated, secretly Western-aware. They live in guarded apartment complexes with consistent electricity, imported cosmetics, pirated movies, and enough plausible deniability to keep their privilege. They attend private universities with foreign language immersion programs. They know the world is bigger and better than what they're told. But they also know the cost of curiosity. So they smile and wait. A young man from this class tells you over contraband coffee, "We will not overthrow the system, but we will outlive it." That's the new rebellion. Not flames, but patience. The state, sensing this erosion, launches its next wave, the 100-year vision. It's a grand plan. Bullet trains from Pyongyang to the DMZ, an AI development park, a new national university to train future global leaders of Juche thought. On TV, it looks glorious. On the ground, it looks like scaffolding and promises. Still, people go along with it. Because what's the alternative? There are no legal protests, no elections, no open debates, just whispers in safe kitchens and nods that say, "I see it too." You attend one of the new tech expos, hosted in Pyongyang, a strange mix of ambition and performance. Robots wave at you. A VR headset displays a simulation of North Korean workers planting rice under the smiling gaze of Kim Jong-un. You ask who developed the software. The exhibitor hesitates, then says, with guidance from above. Even virtual reality is censored. But here's the eerie part. Some people still believe. The older generation, the war veterans, the lifelong party cadres, they cling to the myth, not out of ignorance, but out of need. If they admit the lie, what's left? Regret, rage, collapse? So they repeat the slogans, loudly, as if the volume can drown the truth. And then there's the military. Still massive, still loyal, still fed. While civilians go hungry, soldiers get first pick. Not because of love, but because of necessity. The military is the backbone, the fear engine, the insurance policy, and Kim Jong-un keeps it strong. But even there, cracks appear. Border guards caught smuggling, young conscripts deserting, officers distracted by profit more than patriotism. A system that must constantly remind its enforcers why they're enforcing it is a system already under strain. In the middle of all this, something strange happens. Satellite internet leaks. Not officially, not broadly, but enough. Elon Musk's Starlink reaches Chinese border towns. Signals bleed into North Korea. Traders set up antennas on high ground. A handful of people suddenly see what billions take for granted. Live news, real-time maps, uncensored images. For those few, it's like looking directly into the sun after a life in a cellar. One man who glimpses YouTube for the first time says, "I didn't know the world laughed so freely." The regime cracks down immediately. Raids, arrests, public punishments. But it's too late. The image is already printed on their minds. And images? They linger. So now, the government leans harder into ritual. More mandatory meetings, more choreographed mass games, more revolutionary anniversaries, more tests of missile systems no one believes will ever be used. It's a drumbeat, not of war, but of denial. Meanwhile, foreign analysts debate, how long can this last? Some say the regime is brittle, one shock away from collapse. Others say it's built like termite wood, looks solid, hollow inside, but still standing because nothing heavier has landed yet. And the North Korean people? They don't speculate. They survive. You walk through Kachon, where a farmer sells pickled cabbage out of a tin basin. You ask him how things are. He replies, better than yesterday. Not as good as tomorrow. It's a lie, but it's a comforting one, and sometimes that's all that's left. The wind howls through Mount Pektu like a breath from history's lungs, cold, relentless, and full of stories that refuse to die. This mountain, once just a dormant volcano, has become something far greater, the mythic birthplace of the Kim dynasty, the symbolic heart of North Korea's national identity. Every student must climb it at least once. Every soldier must swear loyalty to it. Every mural, every hymn, every myth begins here. And yet, when you stand at its summit, all you hear is wind. No spirits, no secrets, just the vast silence of a people still pretending. Back in Pyongyang, the Mansudae Grand Monument still towers. Two 20-meter-tall statues, Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, stand side by side, arms outstretched, watching over the city like giant iron ancestors. Tourists and locals are required to bow. Photos must be framed carefully. Smiles must be solemn. But walk a few blocks away, and the mood shifts. A market bustles with traders haggling over instant noodles, pirated Chinese batteries, black market cough syrup. The currency fluctuates daily, based on rumors, not policy. People calculate prices not by state wages, but by hunger. This is the real North Korea. Not the one in parades, not the one in headlines, but the one lived between the cracks. And still, the regime pushes forward. It announces a new 5-year plan, renewable energy for revolutionary prosperity. It promises solar farms, hydroelectric expansion, wind corridors. You visit one such project, a sprawling solar panel installation on the outskirts of Sinuiju. It looks promising, functional, until you realize it's only connected to a handful of elite homes. The rest? Still burning wood, still waiting for the revolutionary electricity that never arrives. But here's what's interesting. The people no longer wait quietly. They grumble. They negotiate. They scheme. You meet a woman who runs a noodle shop out of a converted shipping container. She gets flour from a cousin in China, smuggled via a friend in the border patrol. She pays off her neighborhood inspector with free lunch. Her business is technically illegal, but she's thriving. You ask if she fears arrest. She shrugs. Why would they arrest me? I feed their wives. This is the quiet immunity growing all over the country, not political protection, but practical entanglement. The regime is too dependent on unofficial systems to crush them, so it tolerates the very people it once purged, but not always. When too much freedom leaks through, when a traitor gets bold, when a teacher skips too many ideological lessons, when someone is caught with a USB full of reality, the system reacts. And it reacts hard. Public executions return, not as common as before, but as reminders. A young man is executed near Hisan for distributing K-pop videos. His family is sent to a re-education camp. His name is erased from records. But the video still plays, still spreads. Because in North Korea, suppression isn't as effective as it once was. The tools of control, fear, loyalty, surveillance, are being outpaced by curiosity. And nothing spreads faster than curiosity. Children invent coded languages to talk about South Korean dramas. Teenagers trade fashion advice via sketchbooks instead of text. Adults joke about ration shortages using metaphors only their generation understands. An old joke resurfaces. There are 3 channels on North Korean TV: praise, panic, and weather. Everyone laughs. Everyone looks over their shoulder. Everyone continues. And all the while, Kim Jong-un tightens his grip. Not out of confidence, out of calculation. He knows his people are changing faster than his system. So he redesigns that system, makes it sleeker, less brutal, more sophisticated. Propaganda gets an upgrade. Instead of grainy newsreels, North Koreans now see polished videos with drones, animation, ambient music. The message is the same, the delivery is different. Instead of shouting loyalty, people now like patriotic posts on state-run intranets. Engagement becomes evidence. Metrics replace microphones. And yet, despite all of this, the regime still leans on its oldest trick, the outside enemy. In 2036, a new crisis brews. A minor naval clash with South Korea becomes a major talking point. Kim gives a fiery speech. State TV airs reruns of the Korean War. Civilians are mobilized for emergency drills. The message, we are surrounded. We must be united. We must obey. But the response is muted. People attend the drills, but they joke on the way. People raise the flags, but they don't salute as sharply. Even fear has grown tired. Because how many final showdowns can a nation believe in? You attend a rally in Nampo. A young woman recites her loyalty pledge, then turns to the crowd and says, "We will be the generation that fulfills our marshal's dream." The crowd claps, but her eyes, you see something else. She isn't just reciting, she's testing, seeing how far she can go, seeing who claps hardest, seeing who doesn't, because even the loyal now sense it. The future will not look like the past. It can't. The gap is too wide. Between the city and the countryside. Between the slogans and the silence. Between what the state shows and what the people feel. And so, you walk on. Through streets lit for parades, but empty at night. Past statues of eternal leaders and children sketching hope in chalk. You wonder, how long can a system survive when its greatest threat is not defiance, but indifference? Because in North Korea today, no one dares to rebel. But fewer and fewer are pretending to believe. The border between North Korea and reality has always been blurry. Sometimes it's drawn in concrete and razor wire. Sometimes in phrases, socialist paradise, eternal struggle, or the ever-mutable American aggression. But here in Pyeongchang, a satellite city just outside the capital, that border flickers most clearly. Pyeongchang is where the intellectuals live. The scientists, the engineers, the trusted few who build the tools of both war and illusion. You walk through a research complex that looks like something out of a Cold War fever dream. Mid-century architecture, green glass windows, portraits in every lab, but also code. Actual computer code. Because here's the twist. North Korea has programmers, good ones. They write games for foreign companies under fake names. They build crypto heist software, ransomware engines, and clever phishing tools disguised as mobile apps. Some of the world's most high-profile digital heists now trace back to modest apartments in this very city. The regime calls it cyber warfare. But the coders? They call it a job. You meet one, barely 30, careful with his words. He studied in China, speaks English, drinks instant coffee and wears knockoff Nikes. He shrugs. I hack because I'm good at it. Because the marshal says it's patriotic. Because it gets me paid. Then he adds, because it keeps me from planting rice. This is what power looks like in the 2030s. Transactional, digital, and increasingly disillusioned. Back in Pyongyang, you attend another parade. This one celebrating the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Workers' Party. Massive floats roll through the square, each representing a decade. There's Kim Il-sung, triumphant and immortal. Kim Jong-il, stoic and visionary. Kim Jong-un, waving from a screen the size of an apartment block. The crowd waves too. Flags flutter, slogans echo. But this time, something odd happens. The parade ends early. No explanation, no closing anthem, just a sudden fade to silence. And in that silence, you realize something. The regime knows. It knows the illusion is fraying. That repetition is losing its rhythm. That the slogans echo now like empty drums. It knows the people are no longer afraid. They're just numb. And so it begins testing new tones. Less shouting. More modern optimism. Speeches now include phrases like economic innovation, digital harmony, and even, remarkably, individual initiative. Carefully defined, of course. Rigidly surveilled. But the language has shifted. You attend a university seminar on the future of Korean sovereignty. The professor speaks about blockchain and AI, about energy storage and climate adaptation. He never mentions capitalism, never questions Juche, but every slide screams, we are trying to catch up. Because even in isolation, North Korea feels the pull of the future, especially among the youth. Born after famine, after the worst purges, these kids don't remember the arduous march. They remember cell phones, state-approved but modifiable. They remember state-run karaoke rooms, but also USB drives hidden in socks. They remember Kim Jong-un smiling, but they also remember YouTube thumbnails. In their minds, the world is no longer unreachable. It's just paused. They're waiting for the play button. You sit with a teenage boy who wants to be a programmer. He's never left the country, but he can name every English Premier League team. He thinks South Korean music is overrated. He knows who Elon Musk is. You ask him if he believes in Juche. He frowns. I don't know what belief means. And there it is. The erosion isn't dramatic. It's generational. The regime still fears insurrection, but it should fear disconnection more. Because what's scarier than angry people? Apathetic ones. People who no longer argue, no longer chant, no longer whisper, just nod, go home, and dream of somewhere else. Meanwhile, the ruling class builds taller walls, both literal and metaphorical, new internal security forces, more biometric checkpoints. AI facial recognition rolled out in Pyongyang train stations, under the pretense of crowd efficiency. But everyone knows it's to scan for deviation, emotion, thought. Yet the deviations persist, in language, in gesture, in the way one student draws Kim Jong-un with a slightly crooked smile, in the way a woman in a market hums a banned melody under her breath, in the way a boy asks why his map book still doesn't show the rest of the world. You see it, and you know. Something is forming. Not revolution. That's too clean. But rot. The kind that creeps from within. The kind you don't notice until one day the floorboards collapse. The regime feels it too. So it announces another military advancement. This time, a submarine-based missile system. There's a parade. There's a firework. But the applause? Fewer claps. More delay. More eyes darting toward phones. More glances toward the border. Toward the outside world that now feels closer than ever. In a rural school, a teacher writes "unity" on the board. Then pauses. She asks her students, "What does this word mean to you?" One girl raises her hand. Being able to speak freely with someone far away. The teacher doesn't scold her. She just nods and moves on. Because here, now, even teachers know the future is not loyal. It's listening. And one day, it may finally speak. You're back at the border now, not the DMZ, but the invisible border inside people's heads. It's everywhere, this line, between public and private, between duty and desire, between what is said and what is meant. You sit inside a train car rattling through North Korea's heartland, slow, groaning, its engine coughing more than moving. It's packed with families, sacks of cabbage, a pig tied by its feet, a man selling fried corn wrapped in newspaper. Loudspeakers play music about self-reliance, but no one listens. Instead, people sleep, or whisper, or stare blankly at the windows that show a country paused in time. There's a girl reading a book, upside down. She's not paying attention to the pages. She's thinking of something else, anywhere else. This is the true border now, between presence and escape. You step off in Suncheon, where a fertilizer plant smokes behind a rusting gate. A poster reads, "Fertilizer is the lifeblood of the fatherland." But the workers inside? They're not producing fertilizer. They're producing methamphetamine. Yes, really. North Korea, long famous for its military exports, now has another trade: drugs. Some labs are state-run, others freelance. Meth is produced, packaged, and smuggled to China and Southeast Asia. Profits are laundered through seafood exports, mineral contracts, and crypto. The regime knows. Sometimes it even sanctions the trade, if the loyalty is right. Because now, everything has a price, even crime. You speak to a smuggler who once carried USBs of South Korean soap operas. Now, he runs meth across rivers at night. You ask if he feels guilty. He laughs. Number because in this country, survival is the only morality. That's the new ethos in places where slogans don't feed you anymore. Survive, adapt, smile when watched. You return to Pyongyang, where the illusion is thicker. You visit the Grand People's Study House, a monumental library with columns, chandeliers, and the largest bust of Kim Il-sung this side of the sun. You expect propaganda, and you find it. But you also find curiosity. Young people leaf through English textbooks, discreetly underlining words. A girl practices Japanese. A boy sketches a Boeing 737. A small group sits around an encyclopedia entry on Germany. You look closer. They've bookmarked Berlin, divided city, reunified country. They don't say anything, but they don't have to. The comparison writes itself. Across the capital, that quiet awareness builds. Even as the regime builds new monuments, louder parades, bigger missiles, people are building something else, perspective. They don't speak it. They build it in looks, in silences, in small acts of non-cooperation, in families that skip state meetings and fake illness, in teachers who linger too long on maps that include Seoul. The regime notices. In 2037, a new campaign is launched. The Purity of the Pektu line. It targets youth, targets slang, targets fashion. It bans all use of foreign-sourced cosmetics and haircuts modeled after K-pop stars. Infractions are photographed and posted on local boards for educational correction. A boy in Wonsan is forced to shave his head for using a Chinese facial cleanser. A girl in Hamhung is beaten for humming a song from a forbidden drama. A street vendor is jailed for selling sneakers with Western lettering. But these aren't crackdowns. They're acts of panic. The regime no longer trusts that loyalty is natural, so it demands it. And what happens when loyalty is demanded? It empties. Still, Kim Jong-un maintains control. His speeches now focus on generational unity, on resisting ideological rot, on the sacred duty of young Koreans to preserve the wisdom of their bloodline. But the youth? They're not resisting. They're drifting. In Chongjin, you find a school mural where children once painted tanks and flags. Someone, some brave soul, has overpainted it with mountains, trees, a sun rising over a road with no soldiers in sight. The teacher was arrested. The mural was restored, but everyone saw it, and no one has forgotten. You meet a cab driver in Pyongyang who listens to classical music to block out the broadcasts. He tells you, "If I drive fast enough, I don't hear the loudspeakers." He laughs, then stops, then stares ahead, and drives faster. This is North Korea now, a country still standing, still parading, still dictating. But every year, the voices grow fainter, the applause more mechanical, the fear more manageable, the curtain heavier, because eventually, a performance loses meaning. When the audience stops watching, when the actors start yawning, when even the stage crew starts thinking, maybe we could leave the lights off just once. You visit Panmunjom one more time. The concrete line is still there. The blue huts, the silent guards, the tension. But across the DMZ, a young soldier from the north glances up at a tourist camera, and he smiles. Not a grin, not a sneer, just a small, tired smile, then looks away. That's all. But it's enough. Because the real border is shifting again, not the one between nations, but the one inside hearts. And when that border moves, history moves with it. The rain falls in Kaesong like it's trying to wash something away, centuries of pain, perhaps, or just the thick dust of neglect. You walk through this border city, once a shared economic zone, now sealed off like a memory people are too scared to remember and too proud to forget. Kaesong is a place of almosts, almost reunified, almost open, almost a beginning. But now, it's just quiet. Empty factories, military checkpoints, rice paddies pushing against rusted fences. A monument nearby still reads, "One nation, one blood, one destiny." But even the granite seems unsure of its meaning. That's North Korea now, so much unsaid but not unknown. The people know. They know the economy is broken. They know the world is wider than they were taught. They know the power of pretending. And yet, the system persists. Not because it's strong, but because it's familiar. You meet a train station clerk in Hamhung who's worked the same post since 1995. When asked how he's endured, he says, "I know which parts to act and which parts to hide." Then, softly, "We all do." There is no rebellion, only choreography. But choreography can slip. In 2038, a story leaks. Not from foreign media, but from within. A student at a top university disappears. Rumor says he wrote an essay comparing Kim Jong-un's leadership style to China's Emperor Xi. Not disrespectfully, just analytically. The essay spread quietly. Too quietly. It was found. The student vanished. His professor was reassigned. The department head demoted. But the idea? It's still being quoted. Anonymously, nervously, daily. That's the strange thing about truth. Even in silence, it echoes. Meanwhile, the regime shifts again. Now comes a new campaign, cultural vigilance. It focuses on the domestic threat, not spies, not missiles, not the South, but ideas, soft ideas, questioning, comparing, even dreaming differently. State-approved novels are rewritten to focus more on loyalty and less on love. Patriotic songs are remixed to sound like K-pop, but only in tone, not in message. A fashion guidebook is released, defining socialist aesthetics down to the angle of your hat brim. Quirky fact? They even introduce a patriotic hair gel, mint-scented, called Peck to Pride. You can't make this up. The absurdity isn't lost on the people. They laugh, quietly, in kitchens, not in markets, but they laugh, and each laugh is a fracture. You visit a propaganda art studio where murals are painted to be hung across the country. One artist, middle-aged, tired eyes, tells you, "They used to tell me to paint inspiration. Now they ask for obedience." You ask if there's a difference. He just nods. One of the artists, you learn, paints small birds into the corners of every mural. Not noticeable, not disruptive. Just a bird, every time. You ask why. He says, because birds fly. That's the kind of rebellion left now. Symbolic flight. In 2039, North Korea announces another economic milestone. A partnership with an obscure Southeast Asian country for mineral trade. It's plastered across newspapers. A new road is promised. A new port. But no one believes it. Not even the newsreaders. They read it like someone reciting ingredients from an empty pantry. Meanwhile, the markets continue. The black ones, the gray ones. The kind that aren't acknowledged, but never quite closed. You buy a mango in Rasen that came from Vietnam, wrapped in Chinese paper, paid for in dollars, sold under a sign that says 100% local harvest. Everyone knows it's a lie. Everyone plays along. That's the unspoken contract now. The regime gives people space to survive, as long as they don't dream. But that dream is sneaking back in, through USBs, through songs, through stories told by returning workers who've seen the outside, construction workers sent to Qatar, Russia, China. They return changed, quiet, but observant. One tells his family, their streets shine, their people don't bow. That's enough. You sit in a village near the Chinese border, where power comes for only 4 hours a night. The villagers organize their day around it, cooking, charging, whispering. A child draws on the floor with a stick, sketching a car with open windows. You ask her what it is. She says, a car from outside, where you can breathe. Her grandmother hushes her, but later she gives you a mango. She says, that's what the outside tastes like. You realize then, this isn't about war. It's not about politics. It's about dignity. The people don't want revenge or revolution. They want light at dinner. A door they can lock themselves. A choice of what to wear, where to go, and how loudly to laugh. The regime offers missiles, but the people crave mangoes. That mismatch is widening, and eventually, all mismatches break. Not through explosions, but through hunger. Not for food, but for meaning. And North Korea is starving, not just in the body, but in the soul. It's winter now in Pyongyang. The streets are swept clean, but the wind bites deeper this year. The buildings stand tall and gray, masked in a fresh coat of paint for a leader's birthday that everyone celebrates, and no one enjoys. It's the 110th birthday of Kim Il-sung. There's a parade, of course, fireworks, mass dances, a laser show against the facade of the Grand People's Study House, spelling out slogans like, "A century of greatness," and "The bloodline never ends." But beneath it all, you feel it. The slowness in the crowd, the hollowness in the cheers, the weariness in the marching feet. Something has shifted, not violently, not loudly, but undeniably. The system still functions, the trains still run, the schools still teach, the portraits still hang, perfectly centered in every home and classroom. But you can tell, the engine is failing. Because belief is no longer the fuel. It's habit. You visit a collective farm near Nampo. Once it was a model commune. Now the fields are half fallowed. A farmer tells you quietly, "We're told we grow victory, but the weeds are growing faster." You ask him what he hopes for. He says, "A season that doesn't begin with fear." That's what the people want now. Not freedom, not reform, just a break from the weather of fear that never clears. And yet, Kim Jong-un continues to project confidence. In 2040, he unveils the Path of Legacy initiative, a series of cultural centers meant to enshrine the eternal virtues of the Paektu bloodline. Giant museums, hologram tours of Kim Il-sung's youth, interactive exhibits where children can digitally march with Kim Jong-il. It's all very polished, very expensive, but no one visits twice, not even the school children. Because even myth, when overexposed, begins to fray. That same year, the regime opens a reconnection dialogue, not with South Korea, but with select defectors abroad, framed as a goodwill gesture, a redemption program. But it's a test, a trap for some, a symbolic act for others. One man returns from Canada. He's given a new apartment, appears on state TV, praises the marshal. But people in his old neighborhood don't speak to him, not out of loyalty, but because they know. They know his smiles are for show. They know how many others never returned. Meanwhile, the younger generation continues to drift sideways, not upward, not outward, just away. You visit a small university in Wonsan. Students practice English under a teacher who spent time in China. They write essays about their dreams for Shuche innovation. But one student slides you a note afterward. It says simply, "What happens after the final chapter?" You ask what he means. He says, "Our whole country is one story. But what happens when we reach the end?" You think about that. Because that's the truth of it, isn't it? North Korea isn't running out of power. It's running out of plot. The same characters, the same settings, the same conflicts. It's not that people reject it, they're just exhausted by it. Even Kim Jong-un appears less certain. His public appearances are more carefully staged. His tone, softer. He speaks more of youth innovation and global peace and shared prosperity. Phrases that mean nothing inside borders that don't open. And still, the missiles launch, the soldiers march, the artists paint, the people nod. Because they always have. Because they don't know how not to. But under that layer of discipline is something else. A quiet disobedience. A professor who changes quotes in his lectures, just slightly. A mother who teaches her daughter a southern lullaby. A boy who scrawls hello in Roman letters behind a latrine wall. None of this is treason. But none of it is permitted. And all of it adds up. Across the nation, the distance between the official narrative and private thought has never been wider. And that space, that gap, is where transformation begins. Not revolt, not yet, but redefinition. You end your journey where so many begin theirs, a small village near the Tumen River. A family sits by a fire fueled by pine branches. The children eat potatoes. The father tells a story about a tiger that guards the mountains. "Do you believe in it?" you ask the youngest. She shakes her head. "No tiger lives here now." You ask what she thinks does. She smiles and whispers, "Adore." Then she keeps eating. You look up at the hills, their silhouettes sharp under a fading sky. Somewhere out there, borders tighten. Guards pace, loudspeakers crackle. But in this moment, with ash swirling and shadows dancing, you see something clearer than ideology. A people waiting. Not for orders, not for permission, just for time. Because even in a nation this controlled, time still moves forward, and belief, once lost, is rarely found again. And now, you're back where you started, beneath a dim sky, among statues that still raise their arms to a dream no one dares to fully speak aloud anymore. You close your eyes, and the echoes soften, chants fading into whispers. parades dissolving into empty streets, loyalty slogans curling into dust. North Korea still stands, its borders still hold, its leaders still rule. But within that steel structure, the current is shifting, not with the crash of rebellion, but with the slow erosion of certainty. With tired eyes in classrooms, with hands trading truth beneath folded blankets, with voices that say less and mean more. You remember the rust on the rails in Chongjin, the mango in Rason, the schoolgirl's drawing of a car with open windows. You remember the teacher who nodded instead of correcting, the artist who painted birds, the silence in Kaesong. And it all adds up to this simple truth. A country built on stories must change when its people stop telling them the same way. Maybe the statues will stay. Maybe the slogans will still rise like fog each morning. But somewhere, in a room without cameras, someone is already writing a new sentence, a new version, a new ending. You may never see it broadcast, but it exists. And that is how every wall, no matter how tall, begins to fall. Not with a hammer, but with a question. So let your eyes close gently. Let the hum of wind in the pine trees carry you far from the slogans, the silence, the long march of history. You've walked the whole road. You've seen what they wanted you to see, and also what they didn't. Sleep now. You've earned the quiet. Sweet dreams.